And as I'm running across this parking lot, I get about 10 yards into it and I see this flash to my right. And I instantly know, before I even look, I know exactly what it is. And it's the launch motor of an RPG-7. And as I look, I cannot accelerate fast enough to outrun an RPG-7. That thing goes buzzing over my head, about 25 meters above me, impacts into this concrete wall about 30 meters to my left. And yeah, those things, that's enough to knock fillings out of your head.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today we hear the combat story of former Navy SEAL and Naval Special Warfare Development Group, or Devgru, operator Chris White. Chris spent 2 decades in the teams pre-9/11 and was in the first wave of contractors fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq with Blackwater and similar companies early in the war. Chris hasn't shared his story previously and did so in part to set the record straight on the experience of contractors in the post-9/11 era, who had often been painted in a particularly negative way by the media. Chris now operates Tier 1 Tactical, where he delivers expert training to people, particularly those in law enforcement, in shooting and tactical engagements. I hope you enjoy this wide-ranging and insightful look at Chris's experiences in both the elite levels of the Navy's Special Operations community and his experience as a contractor in some incredibly challenging fighting, as much as I did. Chris, thanks so much for taking the time to share your story with us today.
Right on, Ryan.
So I've been really looking forward to getting into this. As we were preparing, one of the things came up. You've had a long storied career, both in the military and the contractor space. You continue to train. I will never believe your age. Like, you're the most active person that I know who's been out this long. And one of the things I wanted to start with is a forward in a book that you had referenced that speaks to some of the learnings that you had from one of the battles that you participated in. So I was hoping we could start there.
Yeah, that is a perfect way to kick it off. A former girlfriend of mine, she teaches at UC San Diego. She's got a doctorate in marine biology. So she was putting a book together called The Guidance Groove, and it's really how you follow your instincts through life, whether it's relationships or money or your career. So she wanted to use this little story, this gunfight that we got into down there in Najaf in southern Iraq, '04, and specifically the fight, flight, and freeze piece of it. And human biology, human evolution, ever since we were predators, hunter-gatherers, whatever you want to call us, we've had that. And we talked about it when I was on active duty. I went to a bunch of different schools, mostly shooting schools, that they would discuss that, but I had never actually saw somebody just completely lock up. And now there's a name for it. Cooper's colors, the white, the yellow, amber, red, and now it's called condition black. And David Grossman, in his books, he talks about it a little bit. But I actually got to see it right in front of me. A guy on my team never made it all the way up the stairs, never engaged anybody, never made it to the rooftop. And I saw a Spanish light colonel who was a civil affairs guy who was there. He was at the bottom of the stairs on a knee, just looking, had his weapon in his hand, just looking at the steps, was just completely petrified, didn't know whether to shoot or go blind. And I'd never seen it before. And I end up hitting him with a knee. We're bringing wounded down from the roof, and I go into my training mode or whatever, Chief White mode. And I remember blasting the dude with a knee and smashing him in the concrete wall. And I'm like, get the fuck out of the way. What's your problem? We got shit going on here. And then there was another real embarrassing point. We had a safe room, a hard room set up. So all the windows are gone, everything's sandbagged in, it's all concrete in this little place in the middle of town. And there's a guy, a Marine Reserve major, underneath the desk on the radio. And he's telling me, get down, there's a sniper out there, get down. And I wanted to know who he was talking to on this radio, because we didn't have comms with Big Army. And that was the big problem. We didn't have comms with anybody, really. And so I gave him, my thoughts, and he tells me, this is verbatim. when this is over, oh no, here we go. I have a relationship with God. And when this is over, you and I are going to be friends. And all I could say was, I fucking doubt it. I want to know who you're talking to on that fucking radio. And so what I found out during all of this, and by the way, Travis Haley has talked about this thing, and he was there for the second big go round. And the way I got to be the team leader down there was a real circuitous thing. But what I found out, and this is what I knew, and this is what I had been taught from years back, even some LA SWAT guys, that when you're starting to get shot at, not just bullets flying around, but shit starting to impact right over your head and bouncing off concrete, and it's all starting to come apart and go sideways. All of this, when the tough get, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and all this Audie Murphy bullshit. And that's what it is. Because once you start getting shot at, really all you have the brain power of a fucking lizard. That's it. All you can really do is default to your training. That's what everybody does. And if you've been trained correctly, trained properly, and trained hard enough, long enough, you're just going to go back to instincts. Front sight, trigger press, front sight, trigger press, move the gun, move your eyes, keep your head and your ass wired together. And the guys that were trained correctly in my team, Marine recon guys, we had a former Army Ranger, one team guy who was squared away, one guy who was a poser, who I'll get to down the road. And yeah, the bottom line was the guys that were trained correctly responded correctly, and the guys that had shitty training or shitty leadership. And I'm going to say it right now. Look, I make no bones on being, the greatest tactical leader or the greatest operator. But what I could do was utilize people to the best of their abilities, challenge them. Whether the guy was a sniper guy, a comm guy, or whether it was explosive guy or whatever, I could find what they could do really well and exploit that. And so during this time as a contractor, because you don't have the support of the big military, because you don't have little birds and AC-130s and QRFs and all these other things, I learned a lot about myself as a leader. I learned what I could get away with and what I couldn't get away with. And being a contractor in those early days, like we talked about on the phone, was very challenging, enlightening. It was difficult at times, but I got a real good sense of purpose because I could do shit with little to no help. And the people who were in charge from BW back in the day were, Team 6 retired master chiefs they trusted me. They knew what I could do and what I couldn't do. And they enabled me to do what I could do and do it well. Yeah. And that was the problem I had with the whole contractor piece, like you and I talked about on the phone, was the fact that we all got painted with a broad brush as a bunch of money grubbing mercenary guys and, looting and tooting and bumping our gums and all that other shit that went with it, where there was a handful of guys over there, former D-boys and team guys that were trying to do a pretty damn good job with what we had. And I'm not looking for a pat in the back. I just want to kind of clear the slate and let people know that, some of us conducted ourselves as military professionals.
Yeah, I think it's very easy, and it's so common to see the contractor side of the world get thrown under the bus. Happened at the agency, happens in the military, and there's bad apples in uniform also that we've seen. Yeah. It doesn't just exist there. So that's one of the reasons I know I wanted to touch on this, and I love this story to kick us off because it speaks to that, what you were doing. It also gives people a little bit of a background that we'll dig into here of your own time with the elite units in uniform and then transitioning over. Now, one of the things that comes to mind, the discussion you had with the Marine light colonel, I feel like that probably didn't make it into the book forward, I'm guessing.
No. I tried to clean it up because, she's a professor down there at UC San Diego, and I don't want to sully her reputation with my bad language. But when she sent it to her publisher, they thought it was great that here we got this kind of, PhD brownie lady who is now all of a sudden going to use this wartime story as a forward in her book before she ever gets the rest of it going. It was pretty cool.
When we talk about the fight, flight, or freeze. And you mentioned that you train people on this now, right? So I am curious, you came out of a lot of training, as you mentioned, over the years before you got to that point.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that you would have been, like, had you not gone through that training, can you still overcome that fight or flight freeze and move to a fight mode? Or is it really you have to be trained that way?
I would say definitely not. We're by human nature, we just default to what we did last or what we learned to do first. So without the hard training, without the hard selection courses, and this is the problem I have with a lot of the new stuff. And I'm not saying, my daddy beat me, I'm going to beat my kids. I don't want anyone watching this to think that. But there's a reason that all these selection courses, whether it's BUDS or Green Team or selection down at Fort Bragg, and I've worked with overseas military units, the Danish Frogmen Corps, their BUDS is 9 months long. When I was over there was only 111 guys that ever gone through their training. And you can't manufacture special operations. You can't manufacture elite anything because mass produce and elite units, those are not synonymous at all. They're just not. There's no way. There's a reason that 70, 80% of the guys down at BUDS, they quit or they get hurt or they just can't cut it. And that's that thing. A quick little sideline here is I met a guy named Dick Lyons when I was doing a presentation on the teams for the Oceanside Rotary Club. So this guy, Dick Lyons, I met him, he was 89 years old, Ryan. He went through class 2 in 1943.
No way.
Here's Florida. Little sawed-off guy, 5'10", 5'11", 200 pounds. He was an NC2A swimmer at Yale, harder than woodpecker lips. This dude went to the Pacific, UDT, did that, went through another selection course, another Hell Week, and was part of the Scouts and Raiders, which was a very early purple kind of a joint thing. You had UDT guys, Rangers, and Marine reconnaissance guys. Went to Korea. So he was unofficially the first American on terra firma Japan in Okinawa on a hydro recon near the end of the war. He was one of the first guys in Incheon Harbor doing a reconnaissance before MacArthur made the big push and did the big landing there. Goes through that. There's one story to tell you a little bit about Dick Lyons is him and another guy are going out to get those big 500-pound sea mines. They're going to tie a line to it, and Dick Lyons is going to breath hold with a set of bolt cutters and cut, 1-inch wire rope to cut this thing loose. So it takes him about 3 go rounds, and he's an officer at this point, and he's going out on a boat, I think 3 nights later, and they're going to go in and blow some shit up, shoot some people in the face or whatever they're going to do. And they say, hey, Dick, they opened up that sea mine the other night, and it's got the Russian packing slip in it. So that whole thing is TS, so no Silver Star. And he's just like, yeah, whatever. Get in the boat. Let's go do it. And so he became an officer. And then he ended up going to Vietnam in the early 60s, 61, 62 as an advisor. So, of course, I'm curious. And I said, Dick, what was that like in Vietnam, early 60s? And he goes, he says, it's great. He says, there's more fuckers to shoot than we had bullets. And so 2 gringos, usually him and an SF, a green beanie, and maybe 6 or 7 of those Kit Carson scouts, doing sneaky peek shit in the jungle in the early 60s.
Awesome.
And so that guy, so he has a coin, and it says right on it. So the longest running guy, the most senior time in team guy is called the Bullfrog. And he had a coin. So we're eating lunch and he slides his coin across the table, show me, and it says, Dick Lyons, class 2, Bullfrog and everything. And it's been in his pocket so long, it looks like it's been buffed with jeweler's rouge.
No way.
Like you have, because it's been in his pocket for 40 years. And I realized that I had an old Team 1 coin that I had, and I left it in the truck because I was running late. So I slide this coin across the desk, and there's mixed company. There's people's wives and stuff at this Rotary Club. And I look right at him and say, well, sir, I guess I'm buying. And he looks right at me. He says, I guess you're fucking buying, Chief. And I was like, I just got pumped by the Bullfrog.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was honored to meet this dude. I mean, he was he's the guy. He's the guy that everybody wants to be, right?
I think that's a great way, like just getting to know you, Chris, like the humility coming from a guy who is in the elite levels, the tier 1 side, and then the excitement that you have telling that story about meeting this guy in turn.
Well, he went through, I was in, I think on my bio, it says 8 different, they call them hostile fire zones now because you can't call them combat zones. This dude's in 3 major wars, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
That's insane. And for those listening who don't know what the UDT, underwater demolition team, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but that's kind of it's like really the precursor, the origin of the SEALs goes back to the UDT sneaking around the harbors, mine displacement, reconnaissance on the shore. Like, would you like to share any more there just for people who aren't as familiar?
Well, yeah, the UDT thing, and the big push for that was the Tarawa. The Marines ended up getting off those boats, and they had aerial photography, but they didn't see exactly what was underwater. They didn't have those capabilities back then. So I think there was over 1,000 Marines that drowned before they ever got to the beach. So the Marine Corps, Big Navy got together and they said, yeah, we've got these guys that can do this underwater stuff. We're going to do a beach reconnaissance before there's any more amphibious landings. This is crazy. And it made sense to have guys get in the water. And this is where this naked warrior thing comes from, because it's the Pacific. UDT shorts, dive mask, and a belt with a K-bar on it, and a slate for taking soundings to see the depth and draw on. And then they would come back and they had cartographers that could draw an underwater rendition, if you will, of what the beach looks like as it goes from the high water line and then down. So they know where they can run the boats in and where guys can get out without drowning. And and that was the beginning of it. And then it just progresses. Like I said, Scouts and Raiders was that combination joint unit with UDT, Army Rangers, and Marine Recon. And then as we get into 1962, Southeast Asia is hot and heavy. And then they realized that they need a special operations, special forces type capability. But the Navy, they want to go groundwater Navy. And so a lot of people don't know this that might be listening, that the most decorated guy in the whole Vietnam War is a special boat unit guy, BM-1 Williams. He was an E6 boat driver. I think 6 boats shot out from underneath him. Navy Cross, Silver Stars, Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts, 10 a penny. This guy's it. And so that whole transition, and then the jungle warfare is over, and then you move into 1980 counterterrorism, and off we go.
Well, we'll pick up there shortly, I know. So if we jump back in time, I know you didn't have the easiest upbringing. Would anybody have been surprised looking at you now to see this was your path? I mean, if you looked at you as a kid, would they have said, "Oh, that's exactly where I thought Chris would end up: SEALs, shooting, training people"?
Not a fucking chance. No way in hell. I was part of that punk rock, drug crazed youth, whatever, getting chased by state cops on my dirt bike and chasing cheerleaders and doing. I originally thought that I was good enough athlete that I was going to go play linebacker at Penn State and eventually end up being in the NFL and playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, I got news for you. They don't want any skinny white guys playing tight end or defensive end in the NFL. And I figured that out real quick. But I was a good enough athlete that I could get by just on speed and quickness and just natural ability. But I realized that there were guys that were way better than me. So it's a funny story, though. We'll kind of pick this up. So I'm out at Dam Neck. My father had cancer, so I was going back east. And I'm back in my old high school. It's football season, and I see my old vice principal, and I go up and say, "Hello, how you doing?" Da 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 da. And he introduces me to his son, who is going to join the Naval Academy and very Marine officer. And he gives me one of those real weak handshakes. And I thought, man, you're not even going to get out of the Naval Academy. So, long story short, Mr. Miller asked me, now Dr. Miller, hey, so Chris, what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm still in the team. So we had the grubby hair and big foo and all the rest of it back when I had hair. And he says, the teams, what team? And I look at him and I go, what the hell? And then he says, oh, he corrects me. He says, oh, that's right. He goes, that's right. You joined the Navy. And I said, no, I joined the teams. So right away, there was a delineation there that I was trying to make. And then long story, we're kind of shooting shit, reminiscing about old times. And I had some real issues with authority in school and whatnot. So where it comes down to crunch time, and he says, let me ask you something, Chris. Are you good at what you do? Do you like what you do? Are you good at it? I go, yeah, I'm an instructor. I'm a shooting instructor. I teach diving. I've done this, I've done that, da, 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 da. And then, so a left-handed compliment is, he goes, well, Chris, I know you had we had some issues or some troubles here, but he says, some of us knew you were going to be really good at something.
That's awesome.
So there it is.
I love that you did that.
As it may seem,
yeah,
it was pretty cool to go back. At that point, it would have been 10, 15 years later. And then I have another story going back to Pennsylvania later as a contractor that's not quite as pretty.
Just a quick thanks to our sponsor, DeleteME, and we'll get right back to this combat story. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the term doxing, but as I've mentioned on the show, having served at the CIA and in the private sector tracking down bad actors, I'm very familiar with the way online and personally identifiable information can be used against someone. In fact, I've been doxed several times over the past 3 years where my personal information has been shared online. This is possible because data brokers collect huge amounts of PII, create profiles and listings that can include social security numbers, birthdays, past addresses, and more. These data brokers crawl the web to get this information. DeleteME will find this information online and remove it so it can't be surfaced. I signed up and received a bespoke report for myself and my family that showed me all the places my information had surfaced, what information they had, like name, address, phone number, social, and more, and that it had been removed. We all have the right to stay private and protect our personal data. Head to joindeleteme.com and use the code COMBAT for 20% off your plan and avoid being doxxed and harassed like what's happened to me. And now, back to this combat story. Well, I love that you still call him Mr. Miller and then Dr. Miller. Whatever happened back then or the way you're brought up. Maybe this is a good segue into how you were raised. One question I have, though, as you mentioned the delineation you wanted to make between the Navy and the teams, where does that come from?
Well, I was a hard hat diver first. So, and that's the segue, Pennsylvania. My mother was British and I had an American father. So, and he served and all my uncles served. So back in Pennsylvania, you got a lot of guys that had served, but I was the only Navy guy. And my mom had an uncle that worked as a roughneck out on those oil rigs in the North Sea. Well, back in the 70s, Ryan, these guys are making 70, 90K a year.
It's big.
So I'm thinking, hey, and the economy in PA sucks, steel and everything else went down the tube in the 70s. So I'm thinking, yeah, here we go. So he says, hey, if Chris can get his diving certification through the Navy, I can get him a job out here on the oil rigs. And I'm thinking, boom, here we go. So I got this, Ted Nugent hairdo and a bad attitude. I'm working as a roofer, all sunburnt, and probably, smoking something I shouldn't have been on the roof after the afternoon. So I go into the recruiter's office and they're looking at me. I got some cut off denim shorts and a ripped up shirt, all dirty and filthy. And they're thinking, oh, look at this clown. And so they have, I can remember like it was yesterday, they have this 45 question questionnaire thing you got to fill out. And they want to know what your capabilities are or whatever. So my mom was real smart. I got thrown out of school, got a GED diploma. I go down there and I got, I think 43 out of 45 right. So they're trying to get me in this nuclear propulsion program. I go, no. I said, I'm going to be a Navy diver. So the way this guy's explaining it, classic, they just lie through their teeth. He's explaining it as the teams and EOD and Navy divers all work out of this big dive locker. And there's one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. And you can go from being a hard hat diver to a bomb tech to a frogman. And it's just like, changing sauce. And I'm thinking, all right, cool. I'll give this a whirl. And which is total bullshit. But that's how they fill those quotas. So anyway, Navy diver, dive school out in Coronado. I meet a bunch of guys that are in the teams. I watch guys running by when we're PTing in the morning with those rubber boats on their head, and I'm thinking, this looks a little nuts. And then I see them on Monday, and then I see them on Tuesday, and then I realize this is hell week. And by the time Wednesday and Thursday, I mean, they look like a bag of hammers. I'm like, wow, this is no fucking joke. And the instructors are screaming out with a bullhorn and all the rest of it. And I thought, okay, that's cool. So again, we'll compress the story back before cell phones and all the rest of it. My mother gets a letter from Uncle Russell. They ran off all the U.S. Navy master divers. So they brought in Dutch and German and Brits. So instead of 2 guys in the water and a safety diver, they put 1 guy in the water, 1 safety diver. It's cheaper, Ryan, to kill the diver and pay his life insurance than shut the rig down, put the safety diver in, bring him in, put him in the chamber. Now nobody can dive, omitted decompression and all the rest of it, table 6 alpha and a bunch of diving.
This is on the oil rigs you're talking.
This is on the oil rigs.
Shifted. Okay.
Yep. So they made a corporate decision to just put 1 guy in the water. Now we're talking 300-400 feet, black, cold. You're in a dry suit with coveralls over it with tools. So you can get your umbilical cut. You can cut your suit. I mean, this is big shit that's underwater. It's just dangerous as hell. So I figured, okay, plan B, here we go. I'm going across the street and I'm going to be a Navy frogman. I'm going to jump out of airplanes, blow shit up, shoot people in the face. Here we go. And I'm 6'2", 190. Now I can run 1.5 miles in 7:32. But when I talk to my team guy buddies, they're like, dude, you better start eating. And anyway, I show up, class 131, 1984. I show up, I'm about 204. I get done with Hell Week, Ryan. I weigh 188 pounds.
Dang.
That place is no joke. But they're not looking for choir boys, I can tell you that.
So I understand the decision to go diver. That makes sense because you had this business outlook ahead of you, kind of what you're going to do next. But just the decision to go into the military, where did that come from? Was it you would have gone there anyway? It's just you were figuring out what MOS to go?
No, I don't think so. I had been, a mason's helper and a blue collar construction guy, then a roofer guy. But the economy had gone in the toilet. The steel industry, steel and coal was real big, Bethlehem and Pittsburgh. And once all that died, there were no jobs. And I got thrown out of school. And then, so what am I going to do? I'm not good enough to get a scholarship at Penn State. So maybe Votech school. I was thinking about being a machinist, being a welder, doing stuff with my hands, fabricate stuff or whatever. And I thought, well, shit. There was a guy that I used to ride dirt bike with, John Antall, motocross dude. And he tells me a story. He was in the Navy. He was an aviation mechanic. And the way he explained it was he's on an aircraft carrier. They were out on the East Coast. And he said that it was, this is the late 70s, right before the Iran hostage thing. So he said these dudes show up with long hair and beards and off a helicopter. They got some rubber boats and some guns and bombs and shit. And they were told, don't talk to these guys, stay away from them. And he said these dudes showed up. They went down the mess hall, stacked their guns in a corner, came down, ate, went back, and come in the morning, they're all gone. And he's telling me about these guys that run with telephone poles on their shoulder, run around with these rubber boats on their head, and swim 5.5 miles. And I'm like, you're fucking, you're full of shit. Nobody does. Nobody runs around with a telephone pole. You just can't. You can't do that. Well, lo and behold, the fall of 1984. There's Ray Tullis up on the berm with his bullhorn. Yeah. So we go on a 5-mile training run, come back, and the instructors are telling us drink water. And I'm like, this is bullshit. We're getting set up for something. And here come all the instructors and welcome, introduction to log PT. So 5-mile training run, about 2.5 hours playing with the logs. And that was an introduction to log PT. And then that got my attention. I was a pretty good athlete. That shit sucked. I don't care who you are. A couple guys rang out 10 minutes into it. I think Randy Beaujolais ended up in a bathtub full of ice, heat stroke or heat prostration. Yeah, they were going to try and kill somebody, or at least make them quit. So
Chris, you mentioned that you were asked to leave high school. You weren't the most obedient along the way. Does buds knock that out of you? Do you learn later, like where does this person we see today come from? Or is there still a healthy disobedience in there that just operates within the confines of the rules?
That's exactly it. And that's the whole thing. That's the beauty of the teams is we used to call it the home for the wayward boys, Ryan. There's a lot of orphans and guys from broken homes. I was adopted by my American father. So there's guys that went through childhood and this adolescent period, and they were always looking for some type of structure, I think, that we could operate in, but not be completely confined. Like, we'll just call it regular Marine Corps stuff. You're in that lane and you can't move left and right. Well, the beauty of the teams, and for a guy like me, I wouldn't have survived in the regular military because the teams, they want guys like that can think outside the box, is the phrase you always hear, but they want guys that can operate on the margins, because as soon as the bullets start flying and it's complete chaos, that's where you're going to be. You're going to have to operate on the margins. It's not going to be this linear world that the big army wants you to be in. You're going to be on the edges and you're going to have to figure shit out just off the cuff. And I think some guys are wired for it. And I'm not saying I'm wired for it, but through training. And again, the beauty of getting to Team One, when I did early '85, there was still a couple handfuls of the Vietnam vet guys around. And those dudes had seen a lot. And the command master chief at Team One, Claude Willis, 5 tours of Vietnam as a point man.
Are you kidding me?
5 tours of Vietnam as a point man. I see him in the mess hall when I'm going through dive school, and he's a little black guy out of Louisiana, just a swamp rat. And his trident is up on his shoulder, and he has 11 rows, 33 combat ribbons.
No way. Gosh. Jeez. How, so I want to ask about that, the Vietnam veteran kind of experience that you had, like learning from them. But when you mentioned buds, you were naming people first and last names still to this day from class 31. How close did you end up becoming with those guys then down the road? I mean, they still friends, like them by name still?
Yeah. There's only a handful of us that stuck around for 20, but Randy ended up being a warrant officer. Randy and another guy named Chris, Team 2 guys, they were the guys that blew up Noriega's yacht. So when your classmate does something like that, and you got to remember, this is all peacetime stuff.
Yeah.
So there's only little bits and pieces of Grenada, Beirut, Panama, early Gulf stuff, and then some of the shit that I did in Bosnia or whatever. But hey, you got a former classmate, teammate that helped blow up Noriega's yacht. You're like, right on. Okay, the system works.
Yeah,
is really, and you're looking for validation your entire career. And a guy like me, I was kind of, Team One, we went to the Persian Gulf in '88. We're out on those oil rigs, and we got to do nothing. We had some great plans. The Iranians are out there. We're thinking, here we go. Another short story is we're deploying right before Christmas. So the CO is a Vietnam vet. The XO is a Vietnam vet. The command master chief, the senior E9, was a boat guy in Nam, and now is a team guy. So we're hanging out. We're having a few adult beverages with these guys, and then all the Vietnam guys are over by the bar drinking by themselves. And I was on my 3rd deployment or whatever. We're all new guys, just new meets. So we're not invited over there. Those guys are talking their stories. You don't go over there. Unless you're invited, you don't go stick your head in there. So Tom Richards was the CO at the time. Hulk, big weightlifter guy, powerlifter dude, Silver Star, carried a stoner in real no shit meat eater frogman. So they're drinking some wild turkey and they're starting to feel their oats a little bit. And I remember it vividly. The Hulk comes over to me, white boy, da 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 da. He says, the only difference between me and you, and I'm like, well, you're a Navy captain or commander, and I'm just a junior E6. He goes, you just ain't killed nobody yet. I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. So that's how those conversations go with those dudes. once they get the brown liquor down the neck, they're talking about carrying stoners and how shit went. And so you're standing in a room with guys with Navy
That's
Crosses,
amazing.
Silver Stars, Bronze Stars, 10 a penny.
How useful were those stories? Like, how accurate were you able to draw back on them when you found yourself downrange later?
Weapons are weapons. It's physics. Bullets are bullets. Tactics change somewhat, but the weapon systems and the man behind the weapon, people ask me on the range or when I'm teaching today, they say, well, what's your favorite weapon? I just tell them the one I have in my hand, because those guys could pick up anything and kill things with it. It didn't matter whether it was a machine gun, a shotgun, an AK-47, a Swedish K, a British Sterling, a Thompson, whatever. Some of those dudes, they were just gun maniacs. And I learned a lot from those guys, because they would explain different things, different tactics, different weapons. And you can say, well, that was all jungle stuff. It doesn't change that much when you get into the woods or when you get out into the desert. The ranges are increased. It's just like your weapon system in your helicopter.
Yep.
You got the cannon and you got the rockets. Depending on what range you're dealing with, you just, select what kind of ordnance you're going to go with. And there you go. It doesn't matter what the terrain is. It's just the range of the engagement, right? And how close the friendlies are.
Yeah, exactly. Right on. So I guess, Chris, as you talked about like this being a pretty good time, you're getting to learn from these Vietnam vets, but there's no, conflicts except for the sporadic ones as you described. You're in those teams for how long before you go and say, I'm going to take this other route to Devgru?
I even wrote it down in my notes. So when we went out to the Persian Gulf, we had a Marine Stinger detachment, a full platoon, a little bit of a headquarters element. One of the Master Chiefs from training went out there with us. But we get read into this Army Rotary Wing aviation program, and we go up into the hangar, and there's 3 little birds sitting in there, minigun on the right, 2.75 Zumi rockets on the left, all blacked out. And right then is when the switch went click, and I go, okay, this is it. And we didn't get to kill anybody. The State Department got a hold of some of our plans to go get these Iranian bog hammer boats that were dropping the sea mines and stuff. Anyway, we never got to do anything. And 104 days out there, we were just, angry. All we could do was shoot guns and lift weights and get pissed off. We probably would have pulled some pretty good ops off, but that was just the way it was. But I realized right then, okay, we're going from the JV team to the varsity. And whenever I played intramural sports, or whenever I, ran track and played football, basketball, whatever, I was never on a JV team.
Yeah.
Varsity or nothing. And when the coach said my hair was too long to play, I just said, cool. Well, I hope you guys aren't, 0-10 next year. So that was really the impetus for the whole sign up for Green Team, and away we go.
Was it even talked about then, or was it still pretty secretive? Like you never really heard about it?
You got bits and pieces from guys that went and then came back. You saw some guys that would show up for some schools with some very relaxed grooming standards and rent a car, and they're just telling you, hey, if you're going to stick around, you need to. This is the route you need to go. And it was pretty obvious. There was a disparity in budget, and because I was working in training at the time, I understood that money buys assets, money buys training, money buys airplanes, helicopters, bullets. And what's interesting is talking to some of those plank owners back then, for the original SEAL Team 6 guys, November of 1980. We're talking 80 guys and $60 million, Ryan. So I remember asking Mike, I said, what was that like? We're drinking beer in the team room. So this would have been 91, 92, or whatever. And I said, what was that like back then? And he just looked at me with a beer in his hand. He says, White Boy, it was the best time of my fucking life. Because they had to figure out the tactics, the weapons, the parachutes, the boats, the TTP. They had to figure it all out quick, fast, and in a hurry. And they did. They busted up some guys or whatever. But since that time, since 1980, that team specifically shoots more bullets than the entire Marine Corps.
Jeez.
You may have heard that. That's no shit true. And I thought I was a decent operator, pretty good shot. And we had some really talented guys in my green team, guys that went on to be Master Chiefs. The team leader, Scott, he ended up retiring, I think, as a Rear Admiral. So obviously talented dudes.
Jeez.
Killer was a Greco-Roman wrestler. Went, I think, 24 minutes with Hickson Gracie out in Steve Bailey's dojo on the West Coast.
Wow.
Yeah. And at that time, Hickson Gracie was the best grappler on the planet. So phenomenally talented guys. So you found out that you thought you were kind of here, and then you tried out for the varsity team. And then when I get to blue and I find out that there's some big, fast, strong, just tough dudes. And what I learned back in Pennsylvania, I guess, is playing football, stick and ball sports, talent and hard work always beats talent and no hard work. So I just figured out if I was going to survive, I'd just outwork everybody.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I got here.
So I want to ask you, as you kind of made the transition and you mentioned the next level, the caliber, how you did it, and you said you're gonna outwork them. But I'm curious what your strengths and weaknesses are. So that's the next question I want to ask. But just before that, you've mentioned White Boy a few times. Could you give us the origin of this call sign?
I've had this call sign since I was 12. So my last name's White. So growing up Pennsylvania, I'm an hour and a half out of Philadelphia. So whether I'm on the basketball team, the inner city track team, the football team, the boxing team, whatever it is, I'm one of the few white boys out there because all the best athletes are all the Black and Puerto Rican. So we're playing basketball. I might be 12 or 13, 5-on-5 full court out of Lenton Pike at this place in Reading. And, of course, they don't pass me the ball. I got to steal it or I got to get a rebound. I'm diving on the ground to try and get the basketball to do anything. So we win a couple games, and I said to the brothers, we're getting a drink. And I said, hey, you guys can pass me the ball if you want. It's not like you can't see me out here. And, of course, all the brothers, they just think this is funny. Hey, check out the White Boy. So that kind of just carried through. And then White is an easy name to remember. So, and then as it became non-PC, we just changed it to Whiskey Bravo on the radio.
Nice.
That's it.
That's great. Okay. Strengths and weaknesses.
But here you go.
Ahead.
What's funny is I'm at an admiral's retirement ceremony behind Warcom, and there's captains, 10 a penny, and 2-star, 3-star, whatever, active duty and retired. And they see me and, hey, White Boy. And you could see some of the other officers just cringe when they say it. And that's part of one of the reasons I got out is the PC world started to infiltrate into the military and into the teams, unfortunately. I just realized that I was a dinosaur. I got to go.
God.
Just a quick thanks to our sponsor, Rocket Money, and we'll get right back to this combat story. Like many people, we tend to have subscriptions for so many different services in my family, or we buy a subscription and don't realize we're paying a higher rate than we should. I often sign up for something and then forget about it. Rocket Money helps by easily finding your recurring subscriptions and then canceling the ones you don't want anymore. As soon as I signed up, I noticed I was paying for 3 services I hadn't used in over 8 months and was able to cancel them quickly through the service, saving me $23 every month just as a starting point. It turns out that over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving the average person up to $720 a year. Stop throwing your money away, cancel unwanted subscriptions, and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/combat story. And now, back to the show.
On that note, the strengths and weaknesses as you make the jump, what would you say, or maybe what would one of your team members have said about you in terms of this is where he really excels?
Oh, just no quit. Tough it out, whatever, regardless of how cold or how shitty or whatever. Just that Pennsylvania work ethic or whatever. I figured, okay, this is where you kind of make your metal here. If it's gonna, wintertime, Virginia Beach, in the boat, your toes are purple, you wore the wrong shit and you're freezing your ass off. You got Gore-Tex in a wetsuit and you're one boat breaks and you're down almost in North Carolina, and it's just brutal. So the saying goes, Ryan, anybody can be a Navy frogman when it's 85 and sunny. What I tell people is, I want to see what you got after about 5 days of 31 and raining.
Yeah.
And I spent a week on a glacier in Alaska, and it was 31 and raining for 5 days and 5 nights, and it was the most miserable experience I've ever had. Ice climbing and skiing in that shit. Everything I owned was wet. Everything I had was fucked up. And but yeah, that's kind of where you got to pull your panties up right there. That's part of being a fucking frogman, as far as I'm concerned.
It's so funny the way you described that, because I had recently interviewed a guy named Matt Stevens, who was a Devgru squadron commander post 9/11, and they went in after Extortion 17 went down, the Marcus Luttrell thing, and he was kind of up on an outpost on the hill, just directing a whole lot of various units that were in the area. And he said it was the coldest he'd ever been, because they had to get in real quick. They didn't bring all the equipment they needed, raining, cold, in the mountains in Afghanistan. And similar to you, he'd been through BUDS, he'd been through Green Team, and he was like, this right here was the worst. Several days of it.
Yeah. Well, I've got that one, and then I've got a dry suit swim in Alaska, brim frost of 87. I was a West Coast guy, and we got dropped off at a buoy, and it was about 1,100 meters to the beach. And Old Woman's Bay, the water was 34 degrees. And it was a sneaking peek, civilian clothes under a dry suit. I got in the water, slid in the water off that rubber boat, and it just took your fucking breath away. I mean, it was just rude. So anyway, 3 days, 3 nights. That third night, we go cache the dry suits, and we peel these dry suits open. Holy shit. And there's 3 of us, and we get in the dry suits, and we're looking at the water, and we know that we got to get another 1,100 yards to the buoy for the pickup. And yeah, that's one of them. It's just a cowboy up moment. Mike, and I forget who the other guy was. And yeah, right, okay. Fuck it. Here we go. Cowboy up. Let's put our fins on. Here we go. This is what you sign up for. But you have a few of those in your 20-year career or whatever. I've been in Afghanistan as a contractor guy. Never made it up real high, but I got to see, and I know what being up pretty high does as far as being cold and miserable, and get dehydrated, and you get fucked up pretty quick.
Yeah. How about on the other side of the spectrum, as you're in maybe assessing into Green Team and making it through, were there any areas where they were like, hey, Chris, you got to work on this particular skill?
Yeah. I wasn't always the easiest guy to get along with. I demanded a lot of myself and my teammates. So if you polled some of the guys that I've either worked with or trained, they'd tell you I'm a good motherfucker, but I can be a real son of a bitch to work with.
So that was the area. But you mentioned earlier that you're good at challenging people. It sounds like maybe you kind of harness that.
Yeah, you got to find out, task and organize.
Yeah.
You got to find out what your people can do. And the only way you can figure that out is you got to push them. And some people thrive in that environment, some people don't. And I use that in the contractor world. I would figure out what they can do, and if they can only do one thing, I don't need you. I don't want you. I don't want a one-trick pony. I need a guy who can drive, who can shoot, who can navigate, who can run the radio, and stays pretty smooth under pressure. We had guys that were phenomenal athletes, but they fell in love with their sniper rifle or whatever, and that's cool, but if that's all you can do, there's a very limited market for that, and a very limited application in the tactical world.
Yeah, for sure.
Part of the deal in the teams is you're wearing a lot of hats: sea, air, land. It covers a lot of battle space.
What about one of the things I remember that you put in the notes for us was the Army-Navy game? What is this? Because I've been dying to ask and didn't want to ask until we were on air.
It's any of the guys that were in the teams at Dam Neck I'll tell you, we've been Army SEALs since 1986 is when they started JSOC. So the Army runs JSOC and the Army runs SOCOM, and the Army, for the most part, Army and Marine Corps were chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So anytime it came crunch time for a specific op, and again, this is peacetime, the D boys had everybody's ear. And because they were down at Bragg and we were kind of just bastard children, we just called it the Army Navy game. So first Gulf War, I'm over there in '88. So now here comes Schwarzkopf and a real good teammate. They were pitching us going in and putting some boats in those big lakes and running some kind of UDT hit and get ops. Schwarzkopf's comment was, I don't need your people fucking up my war. I'll use the Brits. And then if you read Bravo 20 and the rest of that, and then Mogadishu, Sunday Bloody Sunday, we were supposed to replace the squadron that got baited up, and they thought that it would look bad for another special mission unit from another service to replace a unit that got banged up. So that went out the window. And then, let's see, 94, the Haitian vacation. We go down there, and here I am. I'm on an aircraft carrier. I'm a chief in the teams. I've got 14 years in the Navy, 10 years in the teams, been a rope diver, and I'm moving sodas for a ship's company. Oh. So that was very deflating. And the senior E9 and I had a disagreement on certain leadership and employment of said forces. And I said, okay, cool. I won't be extending here. And off I go to language school, DLI for German. And there was method to my madness. One of the boat crew leaders, who was a real good operator, Clell, was now the command master chief at 2. So I went and talked to him. I said, hey, look, I'm going to go to DLI for German, take a break and come back. And I'd like to come back to Team 2. He said, yeah, let's go. So DLI, 9 months. That was my one little break in 20 years of sea duty, other than Buds and Green Team and dive school. And then I went to Team 2 because they were going to Bosnia. And the Yugoslav thing had just kicked off. So this is 95. And here I am chasing the damn war again. And I'm thinking, I am going to get in the shit one way or another. I am going to get in a mess. And I
Could
get
you feel
there
the frustration, Chris? So like at that point in your career, you're like, I've missed all of these other ones here.
East Coast goes to Panama. The Team 6 guys went to Grenada and Beirut, and I'm like a day late and $1 short on every one of these fucking things. And here I am practicing for the Super Bowl. I can't even get out of the first round of the playoffs. It's like, what the hell? What do I got to do here? So, and as you get older, you realize that window for testing your mettle, your combat time or whatever, it's getting shorter and shorter. And I'm on my, I think, second surgery. I tore my knee up in 94. And then I tore the soleus right off the tibia on the O course. So I'm realizing, just like the NFL, it's not for long. So go to Team 2. We hauled away about a half dozen of those Piffwick dirt bags up to The Hague, and nobody's shooting at you or whatever. I got a little squad in Sarajevo, got to augment the Secret Service counter sniper team for then President Clinton's visit to Sarajevo. And I learned a valuable lesson there. So I asked the senior counter sniper guy, he and I are standing there. I said, so Mr. Agent Man, you're making the big bucks. I said, what's that like protecting Slick Willie? And there was a real pregnant pause. I thought, I might have overstepped my bounds here a little bit. And he says, White Boy, I protect the office of the presidency of the United States of America. Bill Clinton is a tenant and his lease is soon up. And that was the end of that conversation.
Wow.
So how's that?
A professional response. Yeah, exactly. A professional no response.
Yep. And he was a former Marine Scout sniper, good dude. We set up the range. All they wanted to do was shoot our 50 cal. The only reason we got the job is we had a bolt action 50 cal. So his boss is asking me, they called me a master sergeant, I think, because the sergeant major for the Army guys was a former Delta guy, Grenada, Beirut, Panama, and Moog. So he had been around the block, right?
Jeez.
So he calls me a master sergeant. He says, oh, yeah. Master Sergeant White's got a 50 cal and 300 Win Mag. And the guy, he looks at me and goes, where do I know you from, White Boy? And I said, someplace on the East Coast or something. He goes, so what's effective range on that 50 cal? I said, 2,300 meters. Thank you very much. He goes, check, White Boy's guys are on the roof. And all the Army dudes got a case of the ass. So here we are, we're playing this Army-Navy game again. And I think Nelson Miller said it the best. It's good competition is what it is, whether it's your teammates or whether it's a special mission unit from another service. And in the teams, we always took pride in beating everybody's ass. I mean, that was part of it, I thought.
I love that. When do you get to wear the Fu-manchu? You mentioned it earlier. You know, talking about, I think it was Dick Lyons, like, hey, come up, he's still got the Fu. When do you get that honor?
Well, when I was a hard hat diver, early 80s, you could wear a beard in the Navy. And that's what kind of separated us from all the other pogues. I was a Navy diver, but I had a beard or whatever, and I thought I was in pretty good shape. And but here's another one of those things. Every time I'd go to the gym at the Marine Corps base or whatever, and I'm in some running shorts, but I got jungle boots on because I'm running there in my boots and getting ready for buds. And people would ask me, hey, are you in the teams? And I had to say, no, I'm just a diver. And that, just like everything else, just rubbed me raw from start to finish. I just hated having to say that. Because and this is one of the reasons, we'll get into this whole poser thing. One of the reasons I have no time for those fucking people at all.
Well, you mentioned Bosnia and wrapping up some PIFWICs. It's not in heavy gunfire, but at least it's real ops, right? At the time. I mean, it was from what the military had seen, at least you were doing some type of operations downrange.
Yeah.
When you come back from that, sounds like you're nearing the 20 mark. What are you thinking is the future at that point for you?
Well, I'm trying to make E8. So I've gone to language school. I've been an operator. I've been a door kicker. I've been an MOE guy, explosive breaching. I've been an instructor. I've been to Germany working with the Germans. There's not much I can't do or teach. And again, I'm not the greatest operator, but I'm a pretty fucking good instructor at this point. I've been around the block, and I'm thinking, okay, East Coast, it's kind of over. The PIFWIC thing, I'm going to just stay at Team 2 and work in training. I was trying to put a little bit of my life back together with my daughter, my ex-wife out in California. So I thought, I can either go out to BUDS and be a BUDS instructor. I thought, do I really want to do that? And so a slot opens up at Commodore at that time, Commodore McCraven's staff out in Group 1. So he's the senior 06 on the West Coast. Something I go out there, work in training and readiness, be a staff puke for a year and a half or whatever, pick up E8, maybe pick up E9 or whatever, give me some options. So I go out there, and I knew Bill McCraven when he was the ops guy at Team 1 in the mid 80s. And so here I am again, it comes full circle. There's only two handfuls of us on the East and West Coast. So I've been a West Coast guy, go to the East Coast. Now I come back to the West Coast. And I'm evaluating these operational exercises that guys are doing. And it's pretty cool. I get in the field with the platoon. I get to swim across the beach with them and watch them patrol and set up and hit these targets or whatever and give them my feedback or what I thought they did well or whatnot. So I'm back in the training mode. It's not operational, but it's something that I'm good at, that I enjoy. I'm back in the field with the boys, and we're drinking beer afterwards or going down to wherever. And so I get an opportunity from a guy I know who's over at Team 3. Let's see, I knew Frank since '88. He and I went through a training course together on the West Coast. So he's now the command master chief. And there's a handful of us that are all E7s on the West Coast. We can't make E8 to save our lives. So some guys decided to put a warrant package in. I couldn't talk myself into being a warrant officer. I knew I was going to end up working in diving or training. So I said, the hell with it. So I go over, talk to Frank, and he said, they're looking for a platoon chief at Team 3, somebody, some adult supervision, a training guy who could, be a platoon chief and go over and, lead these young meat eaters and show them the right way to do business. So I talked to my girlfriend at the time, and she's a physical therapist, and she goes, "Are you fucking crazy?" She goes, "I've seen your X-rays. So now, I've got rotator cuff, lower back. I've smashed up my hip, riding dirt bikes and just doing all kinds of silly shit. So I'm pretty used up, and I'm thinking, I'm good. I'll throw my hat in the ring." Well, they won't let me go. So I just said, okay, I'm at this point, I'm at 19 and change, and I just think, okay, what else is out there? And I always looked at the shooting instructors, and I really took some notes on how they teach and how they go about business and whatever. And I thought this would be pretty cool. And I always wanted to race motorcycles. So I thought, you know what? Fuck it. I'm done. I'm going to race bikes, shoot guns, train some people. I'll get a GS job, or I'll be a contractor guy or something. So this is pre-September 11th.
Yeah.
So here's a great story. I'm the physical training officer, so I'm leading PT, and I put in a chit transfer to Fleet Reserve. And oh, by the way, I put in there that I did not want the commander-in-chief to sign my retirement papers, which takes about 6 months to run through the chop chain just because. And so Bill McCraven, then Commodore McCraven, says, "White Boy, are you going to be in your office after PT?" Absolutely. So what's that all about? Here I go. I'm going back into the CO's office for the umpteenth time. Some good, some bad. And so I walk in, take a shower, throw my camis on, I come into my office, and McCraven's sitting at my desk with his feet on my desk. And he says, "Come on in, Chief, close the door." I'm thinking, oh, fuck, what did I fuck up now? Like, oh, no. And says, "Take a seat." So this is all the precursors. This is very much like captain's mast in the Navy, office hours, whatever you want to call it, of which I've caught various phases of in my career. So he says, "I saw that chit come across my desk, your transfer to Fleet Reserve." And he starts in with, "I'm very disappointed. And, we need guys like you to stick around. You got all this experience," or whatever. And then he said something that really just sent me through the fucking ceiling. He says, "Sometimes, White Boy, you just got to take one for the fucking teams." And I just, all stop. And I said, "Permission to speak freely?" And this is where he made a big mistake. He said, "Of course." He goes, "You and I go way back when you were a new guy at one." I go, "Yeah." I said, "Take one for the team, huh?" I said, "Have you looked at my jacket?" I said, "There's bits and pieces of me from Thailand to fucking Germany." I said, "I've got as many SEAL teams under my belt as your command master chief has spec war deployments. How about that?" And then he was like, right away, he's backpedaling, like, whoa. I said, "Oh, I'm not done." I said, "Take one for the teams." I said, "I've done 20 years on straight fucking sea duty. I can't make 8. And then your command master chief ranks me with the rest of the fleet chiefs." I said, "I'm fucking done." And I said, "You got the last drop of fucking blood out of White Boy." And wow. So he's like, whoa. Now, we can, do you want to go to language school again? Or maybe we can get you orders. I was like, "No, there's a reason you got 20-year retirement, right?" I said, "I am all used up." And he goes, "Well, if you ever need a reference, da-da-da-da-da-da-da." I said, "Yep, all right." Boom. And I got my shoulder worked on, had a 2-centimeter hole in my rotator cuff for about 10 years, got that fixed. And then, that was it. 6 weeks later, I'm out. And I take a contract job in Bahrain, trying to turn this diving unit into some kind of half-assed UDT thing. I'm the only guy there. $75K a year plus housing and some plane tickets or whatever. I thought, okay, we'll see how this goes. And then I got there summer of 01, September 11th.
Oh.
Boom. I'm living in Bahrain, in a foreign country, in a Muslim country, when September 11th goes down.
Just a quick thanks to our sponsor, HelloFresh, and we'll get right back to this combat story. Oh, how we love HelloFresh in our family. We've used it for over 3 years to prepare delicious meals for our family of 5 at least 3 to 4 nights a week, long before they sponsored us. The best part of HelloFresh has been the variety. I really dislike having to come up with new meals to make at the house every week. We tended to do the same thing week after week. Spaghetti, hot dogs, burgers, tacos. Don't get me wrong, those are all great, but week after week they can get old. HelloFresh gives us new meals all the time and takes the pain out of meal planning. Just as an example, we have so many of these different meal plans that we use. 1-pan pork fajita lettuce wraps, beef flautas supreme, honey butter barbecue pork chops, umami ginger pork bowls, firecracker meatballs, sun-dried tomato spaghetti. You get the idea. There are so many things that we never would have made normally that are now regulars in our house. So go to hellofresh.com/combatstory50 and use code combatstory50 for 50% off plus free shipping. That's hellofresh.com/combatstory50 and use the code combatstory50 for 50% off plus free shipping. And now, back to this combat story.
Chris, I got to imagine you come out of 20 years of service at the elite levels. You're always hunting for that fight. And then you're just out. You're in Bahrain by yourself, basically, and 9/11 happens. What was it like for you?
Pissed off like 20 motherfuckers. Disappointed in myself initially, like, why did I leave? Why? It took me a little bit to get over that. I go in to see the colonel the very next morning who runs this unit. He was educated in the UK, smart guy, and he liked me. So we're talking about the attack, and this is the very next day. And he's asking me if I think this is kind of Timothy McVeigh, something from the inside. And I said, oh, no. And I had a pretty gut feeling about this thing. And he says, well, what do you think is going to happen next? And I said, just to kind of set the tone, I told him, I said, well, last time somebody attacked our country, you know what we did? And he knew exactly what I was inferring. And he's kind of turned a little bit pale. And I said, this is going to get real fucking sporty real quick. And sure enough. So if I would have took that platoon chief job at Team 3, I would have been one of the first guys in Afghanistan from the regular teams.
Oh.
But I met a guy working for Sig Sauer, Harry, who was one of those guys from Team 2. And he got out of a Humvee and stepped on a landmine and lost both his legs. So, coulda, woulda, shoulda. When it comes to that kind of shit, you better be real careful what you ask for or hope for.
So what do you do next with this happening and the war building up?
So everything's going, and I'm on the interweb as fast as I can go. And initially, there weren't a whole lot of contract jobs, but I've got a pretty decent resume from the teams. So I'm pimping my friends. And then I get an email from a former Delta guy, Alex. And he works for KBR as a regional security coordinator. And he's in the stand. And this is early days. So we're in the very early part of 2002. And hey, we're looking for a security coordinator. Somebody sent me your res, DDDDD. Are you interested? Fuck yeah. And little do I know, the KBR guys still can't carry guns over there. So anyway, I come back from Bahrain, shoot down to Houston, go through their quickie training. And I'm the first TF Blue guy to be a security coordinator for KBR. So go over there, meet Alex. Cool dude. He lost his hand on a flash crash that went off and got out early. And great dude. He gives me the ins and outs. So I go Bagram to Kandahar and then back to Bagram and down to Kabul to set up the original Camp Phoenix and then back down to Kandahar. Anyway, we'll give you a quick story of just how goofy this is. I'm in civilian clothes with a sat phone, a computer, and look just like an agency guy. I'm going out to these FOBs out near the Paki border, a place called Spin Bilduck. And there's a couple of Delta guys there, active duty guys. And they're like, hey, they recognize me. I recognize them. And they're like, where's your blaster? I said, oh, man, that's kind of a problem with, like, you're flying around and fucking Black Hawk out here. And this FOB, by the way, is 10 clicks. It's 6 miles from the Paki border. I mean, when they point to the east and go, yeah, that's where the Taliban come from, I'm going, oh boy. So there's a pile of beat up AKs. So the guy's like, you run an AK? I'm like, absolutely. He says, you know how to run a machine gun? Fucking A. So we're up in the tower. They got 2 M2 HBs, and then the other 2 towers, they got 240 Golfs. And I was an old machine gunner guy. And then they asked me, can you shoot mortars? And I go, fucking A. I went to mortarman school at Camp Pendleton as a new guy. And so they showed me the mortarman pit, and I boom, gun target line, bubbled up, all ready to go. And then the fallback plan is back to the mortar pit, melt the machine guns after they're all out of ammo. I'm like, yeah, okay, here we go. And so I realized right away that one, I was still a team guy, and two, I was still kind of a gun guy. And I thought, yeah, this run around here with no gun, this is fucking stupid. And then I think one of the flights back from Kandahar, they shot some flares. I don't know, they got painted or something, or a man pad, something happened. And I'm in the back of a Black Hawk, TF-160 Black Hawk, wake up and this thing's juking all around, going to the ground. And I'm right back on active duty. And here I am, civilian clothes, no blaster, sat phone. I'm thinking, and we're out in the middle of fucking nowhere.
I can't believe you had no weapon, Chris. That's crazy.
No weapon. Yeah. Not even a fucking pistol to fucking shoot myself. So, I figured if I'm going to be doing this contract shit, I got to get a blaster. So I'm bouncing around a little bit, trying to figure out. KBR is talking about, well, we're going to see what happens in Iraq. And then I get an email from a guy named John Branchizio, another Gold Team guy, Damnet guy. And he says, hey, man, I'm down here in Tel Aviv. We got a slot open. You want to come down here and run the Gaza Strip with us? And I'm thinking, like a dumbass, fuck yeah. Okay, now I'm going to have 3 guns, and I'm going to be driving a truck again, and all the good shit. So boom, Afghanistan, back to San Diego, get a new passport, back to the East Coast, vetting course, and 3 days later, I'm in Tel Aviv. We do a little bit of training on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday morning, I'm down the Gaza Strip, running these bourbons, and the IDF had this big incursion going on that they don't notify anybody. They just go down there. So my first day on the job, we come over the hill, we go down, road's blocked, and we come back over the hill to figure out another way. And as we come over the hill, Ryan, there's a 120 millimeter smoothbore out of Makaba battle tank, 21-year-old, maybe 20-year-old captain, and a smoothbore just goes and just tracks us just like that. I'm in the right rear, and I look, and the barrel on that main battle tank looked like it was as big as a fucking 50-gallon shit can. I was just looking at it like, whoa, okay. And we go by, and this captain looks at us like, what the fuck are you guys even doing down here? So the joke on the picture was, we come down the hill, there's an APC, and there's a dude, and he's like, get the fuck out of here. And that's my first day on the job in Gaza.
Oh my God.
So Glock 19, 5 magazines, no body armor. This is after the second intifada. So this is, I show up, let's see, this will be April of 03. So they're calling it the roadmap to peace. We call it the road to nowhere. They're throwing all kinds of money at the Palestinians, trying to, do the hearts and minds thing. Anyway, there's a lot of issues with this. The trucks are shit. They don't have a truck guy, so I take over the trucks. They don't have run flat tires. They don't have any armor over the gas tank. They're gas-powered Suburbans. Other than Cheesy and I, no one has any real driving background. I used to race motorcycles, road race and stuff. So 150 mile an hour on a motorcycle, I'm cool with it. So 100 miles an hour in a Suburban, I'm okay. The rest of the guys on the team, there was Cheesy, one D-boy who was squared away, and the rest of them, the team leader was a Marine security guard. I'm there less than 2 weeks. The Dine Corps has the contract. Their program manager comes over, and the first thing he does is fire the team leader, and boom, he's gone. And of course, White, I'm at the end of the trail again, so I'm the last guy to talk to him. And he says, so, he goes, we fired Dave. I'm like, yeah, okay, news flash. And he goes, what do you think about being the team leader? I go, no. Time and team. Said the D-boy's been here, I think, the longest. Said he's up. It's his turn. And then he asked me what my thoughts were on this protective detail. And I said, well, with all due respect, sir, this might be the most fucked up detail I've ever seen. And it's dysfunctional as could be. So I got a list of things with the trucks. So they've been on the ground over a year. I'm there, and no one has test fired any of the weapons. not the carbines,
Oh,
not the
geez.
pistols, nothing. They put a mechanical BZO on the guns, and they said they're good. So I get a civilian range lined up, and I'm like, look, we need to go test fire these guns. We need to get them sighted in. We need to do the proper thing. And it all comes. This is my first taste of the money part of contracting. It all comes down to who's going to pay for the bullets, who's going to pay for the range. DynCorp says the embassy's paying for it. The State Department. State Department says we're not shooting. We don't need to shoot guns, so you guys pay for it. So anyway, we go back and forth. The whole 7 months I'm there, didn't shoot those guns one time, not fucking once. Which I just now I look back at it, no body armor, downtown Gaza City with a Glock 19 on my hip, with a shoot me first vest on. Some of the dumbest shit I've done, and I've done some silly shit. Trust me.
When's the first time you find yourself in a hairy situation as a contractor? Is it Najaf in 2004?
There's two that I'll give you. And my experience in Gaza and Palestine probably set the stage for the rest of my contracting days. I had been to the, terrorism 101, 102, 103 schools and all that stuff. But being in Palestine and we did 2 trips to the West Bank and the rest of the time in Gaza, it's the who's who of terrorism.
Yeah.
Arafat's still alive. So there's guys called 417, which are Arafat's bodyguards. Hamas is taken over from the PLA, and Hamas is, nothing more than Hezbollah South. There's the Al-Aqsa Brigade. There's the female suicide bombers from the Al-Aqsa Brigade. So it's the who's who. It's like the Super Bowl of international terrorism. And so I'm paying attention when we go to the embassy and we're getting the update briefs. They have my undivided attention. And so we're doing a route survey. Route 8 is the one that goes from the north end of Gaza all the way down to Rafah, which is at the very bottom where you have Green Line Israel, Egypt, and Palestine all come to a point at the very bottom, and then the Sinai is right there. So we take the defense attaché, who was an SF light colonel, civilian clothes, unannounced. We just go and see these little Palestinian checkpoints. Well, most of the time we show up unannounced, 2 trucks, and these guys, they're drinking tea, smoking cigarettes, AK-47s laying all about in different various stages of disarray, standard Arab stuff. Well, we pull up at 1. Cheesy he's the shift leader. So he gets out with the boss and they're talking to some people. This guy can speak Arabic pretty well. So there's one dude who's an older guy, kind of a purple gray, real faded, shitty camis, but he's got an AK-47 with a sling on it, and he's got it slinged up tight, and he's got his right hand on the pistol grip, and he's got his trigger finger right on the safety. And he's trying to maneuver his way around Cheesy so he can get near our principal. And Cheesy's doing, they're doing this little dick dance. I'm on the back side of the Suburban. So what I would do is just take one of the carbines. I'm 6'2" with, gorilla arms. So I'd take the carbine, take it off safe, and then lay it flat on the roof. And then I got my non-shooting hand hanging onto the roof rack. So I can see over the truck. So they play this little dance, and then this guy, what tells me everything I need to know is with his non-shooting hand, gets out a cigarette, and then he's got a fucking Zippo lighter, lights a cigarette, puts the lighter away with his non-shooting hand, and he's still maneuvering around. So Cheesy gets the shits of this. He looks at me, I nod, Cheesy takes 2 steps back, and then I'm looking right at this dude, and I smile, and he sees me. And I nod and he nods, and he realizes that no matter what happens at this place, good, bad, ugly, his fault, my fault, nobody's fault, he's the first fucking guy getting shot right in the face because I can just pick the gun up and shoot it one-handed. And he realized the gig was up, so he kind of took 2 steps back. Cheesy took 2 steps forward, and the little dog dance, dog sniffing thing was over. But and then here's another one. And Randy just cued me on this, and I wrote it in my notes. And this was the beginning of some of the horrific shit. So Palestine's a fucked up place, and things that go on there, like I said, it's the who's who. But what I don't know is just how cheap life can get. Now, I've been to Southeast Asia, I've been to Africa, I've been to El Salvador, been all over. And shit can get real sideways real quick, fast, in a hurry. But I'm driving. Cheesy's in the right front seat. We're coming out of Gaza, heading due north. So we're doing 50 miles an hour. I'm in third gear, just putting along. Cars on one side of the road, cobblestone with sand and shit, and not the greatest coefficient of friction, if you will, for your tires. And I'm looking straight ahead, and I see some little feet, what looks like little feet, some shadows underneath the vehicle on Cheesy's side. I said, 12 o'clock. Cheesy, I got it. And those armored Suburbans, you can't roll the windows down. So it's just go, 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 push, push, push. And just as we get within, I'll say 5 yards, 15 feet, I'm doing 50, almost 60 miles an hour. I see a full-size adult push a little girl, maybe 11, 12 years old, out right in front of my fucking truck. And I jerk the wheel on the binders. I'm up on the curb. The truck's doing all kinds of funky shit. I see her face go by the passenger side mirror. Just, I don't know. So one of the events that changed me, for probably for better or for worse, both. We're leaving Gaza, heading due north, coming out these side streets. I'll paint the picture: cobblestone with sand, trash and shit all everywhere. Little cars parked on the right-hand side, so you're driving on a half a street, kind of a goat trail, and a little tiny curb on the left. And I'm looking 12 o'clock, third gear, 50 some odd mile an hour, just taking it easy. We're leaving, no big rush. And I see some what look like feet in between a few cars ahead. At that point, it's about 75 yards ahead. And I said to Cheesy, 12 o'clock, feet. Cheesy's got it. And push, push. So now we're on the gas. Now we're doing 60, 60 plus, about as fast as you really want to go on those shit roads. And sure enough, just as we get 5 yards, 7 yards from those little feet, full-size adult pushes this little young girl, maybe 11, 12 years old, out in front of the truck. I jerk the wheel, we're on the brakes, bounce off the curb, truck's all over the place, and I'm on the skinny pedal as hard as I can go. And Cheesy's telling me, fuck that, man. You just got to run them over. And it's like, so we get past that. I said, hey, man, look, you can fire me. You can send me home. You can do whatever. I'm not running fucking kids over. I'm not doing it.
And you've got a daughter, right, Chris?
Yes, I have a daughter.
Yeah.
And, my mom was a British nurse. We're not wired for that shit. And that's the first time that anything like that had happened to me.
Wow.
It fucked me up. So we get back to the embassy. We park the trucks. Cheesy and I are talking about it. He's like, look, you're right. That fucking motorcade ain't worth running. But when I go talk to the RSO, we got to fill out a report. Hey, this happened, approximately this location, what we would call an after action report, just kind of a little hot wash report. And what I find out is if I run that little girl over, because I'm a contractor there at the U.S. Embassy, somebody from the State Department the very next day goes down there, finds the family, and they pay them $30,000 cash, U.S. hardbacks, that day.
Yeah.
So that's how cheap it is at Palestine. $30,000.
Oh my God. One of the things that comes to mind when you say that, oftentimes on this show, because we're talking to veterans who have been in places like Afghanistan or Africa or Iraq, we all know how good we have it here in the US. And we often say that, we've got our downsides for sure, but I grew up in Southern Africa, in Zimbabwe, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
And they used to, there and Pakistan. I saw this a lot in Pakistan when I was at, 10, 11, 12. They'd have kids begging on the side of the road where the parents early on in life would break a limb.
Yep.
So that when you're more incentivized, as a foreigner, to give them more money. And oftentimes, as you were telling this story, made me think, oftentimes on the show, we mentioned like, once you go overseas, you see what it's like, but we never really talk about the examples. And what you just shared is a perfect example of how cheap life can be in those scenarios.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
God.
And we're not wired for that shit. I know another team guy who was south of me. I was down in Najaf, and we'll get to that. He was down in Diwania. kids get off school, whatever, they're rolling. The kids are being coached by some adults, and they're rolling hand grenades down the street underneath the vehicles. And Zach's got to fucking blast this kid. The first grenades come around. They don't have the pins pulled or anything. They're just rolling down the street. And then the second ones blow up short. And then the third ones are getting closer and closer and closer to the trucks. And they're at a venue. They're up on the roof. And oh yeah, it's fucking horrible shit. I mean, what do you do?
Yeah.
At that point, you're out of options.
Some of the folks I've talked to, the very few who've had to pull the trigger on a kid, knowing it was a kid, really devastating long-term effects mentally from that.
There's one more I'll share with you.
Yeah.
With kids, since we're on that, is we're down at the water district. So we go in, I go up the stairs, check the roof real quick, and never put our man in a, I hate elevators to this day. I'd much rather take the steps. I'm just so paranoid. The door's going to open up and you have no idea who's going to be there when the door opens. So we send our guy in. So I go out front, post up. I'm taking a look around, restage motorcade, standard shit, you know. And this little kid comes around the corner, again, 12, 13, 14 years old. And I always used to carry chewing gum or some candy or something. I always had gum because it's just a way to burn up the nervous energy, I guess. And so I hand him a little stick of some electric watermelon something. And this little kid comes up and just spits right on me and yells some shit in Arabic or whatever. And I instantly know that I'm getting set up here. And so I go back inside, wipe off my shoot me first vest. And I tell everybody, hey, don't post anybody up outside, but the hatred and the burning, seething hatred that I saw. And I'm not a little person. Back then I was 6'2", 2.25", walking around or whatever with all my shit on. This little kid, totally indoctrinated, knew that I was the Western devil and he was going to do whatever he could. And I thought, yeah, there it is. That's next year's suicide bomber.
Jeez.
Palestine, of all the places I've worked, Ryan, I'll just say it, Palestine was the craziest. So anyway, we fast forward. I'm getting near the end of my tour. I'm supposed to take a month leave, and then they bring in another team guy who's going to be a rotator. And so we're moving in these new team houses, and there's some talk. So the program manager is part of the team in Jerusalem. Comes down, and I've got a little thing of grievances. I got my little chief book out, and money, per diem, this, that, boom, bom, bing. New team house doesn't have air conditioning, and they're telling us if you want air conditioning, you pay for it. And I said, hey, Roger, does your house in Jerusalem have air conditioning? Oh, well, that's different. So I talk about the guns, time and place predictable. I talk about the trucks. I talk, I'll go just down this list. And he stops me about halfway down through my little list of grievances. And he says, hey, White Boy, if you don't like it here, you know what you can do. And I said, well, thank you very much, Roger. That brings me to my next point. I said, as of tomorrow, 1 October, we'll just call that my 30-day notice and I'm done. And I tell him, look right at him. I go, you keep doing shit like this, somebody's going to get fucking killed. I go to Australia to a MotoGP race. 15 days later, I'm down there watching a MotoGP race. I go to an internet cafe just to check some email shit. There's a TV in the corner, little color TV, 19-inch or whatever, little place way south Australia, right next to the next thing to Phillip Island is Tasmania. And there's my truck, 939, upside down, all fucking blown up, doors open. And I pull up my email and there's 43 emails, because everybody thought I was still there.
Wow.
Killed in action. So John Branchizio was in the right front seat, my seat. John Lindy, right rear. Mark Parsons, left rear. And then Oscar was driving. He got blown out of the truck as it got launched. 250-pound roadside bomb, command detonated. And then they sent Oscar, he got all burned up, fucked up. They sent him to a Palestinian hospital, and then they had to come down and get him. And
did the others die in that, Chris? Did the folks in the front seats die in that attack?
Yeah. Oscar's the only guy that lived. So there was another, and again, if we go all the way back to Carolyn's book, and in the book, I talk about it as my spidey sense. And if your spidey sense is buzzing like a son of a bitch, and this goes all the way back to when I was I was stealing cars in Newark, New Jersey, and taking them to Queens and selling for $500. So I had this spidey sense pretty tuned up, if you will, whether I was stealing cars or getting blown up, and which I thought was just good frogman training, right? And yeah, that spidey sense. If you don't listen to that, that will bite you in the ass every time. And again, I go back to what Carolyn talks about. You have a million years of human evolution, all the way back to hunter gatherers and living in a cave and predators and all the rest of it. And all of that is still in us, I believe. And I think through training, what you hit on, through training, you can bring that out. You can magnify it a little bit. I think some guys have it more than others. I'm nobody special, but maybe through my upbringing and maybe getting chased by state cops on my dirt bike, maybe mine's a little bit more tuned up. But it has saved my ass a couple of times.
God. When do you transition over to Blackwater? Because I know that was one of the things we touched on early.
Yep. November of 2003, I get an email. So I leave Tel Aviv, Australia, come back, and now I got to kind of reset my shit. They blew my truck up, killed half the team. Okay, am I going to keep doing this? Part of me I'm doing this whole self-examination thing. Do I want to keep doing this? If I don't do it, am I a fucking pussy? What, who, what, where, when, how? Fuck it. I'm a single guy. I'm staying a fight is a Ranger term. So I get an email from former Team 6 Master Chief working at BW. And I had been down to BW's compound when I was working and training at Team 2, nice ranges and all that other stuff. But now it's different. So convoy security job, they're looking for some leadership guys. And it just so happens, I throw my name in a hat. I get a call from Brian. Yeah, come on down. Boom, boom, boom. Plane ticket. I get out there and I'm looking at the force list. And this is it's a DOD contract. And there's a guy named George, retired senior chief, who ends up he was my sea daddy, kind of. He ran the camp out at Niland, California for the West Coast. Vietnam, Frog, 2 tours, Silver Star, Bronze Star, I believe. Completely nuts, motorcycle racer, fearless. And here I am again, back with George, but now it's under different circumstances. So I'm trying to blow smoke up his ass, like, the student has become the master. And he's like, fuck you. You're still a fucking new guy to me. Shut the fuck up. And there we are again. And George was a demo guy, a tactics guy. So Vietnam, Panama, everything. So we go through the training. George is 10 years older than me, boom, 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 15 dead hang pull-ups, run, push-ups. The guy's just a machine. So everyone's going with tricked out M4s with red dots and broomsticks and all this other shit, everything but a minesweeper. George has got an M4 with iron sights on it. No flashlight, no nothing, just a regular, what we used to call a Car 15. So we go through this stress course. I'll tell you how good George was. It's 2 guys, barricade, shooting and moving, up the stairs, got moving steel on a wire and all this other stuff. Pretty comprehensive. 7-8 minute stress course, push-ups, run up the stairs, run down, shoot, bang, bing, bing, bong, bong. So I got the best time and I'm pretty happy with that. So I go down to the pistol range and now we're going to qualify with Glock 19s because that's what we're going to carry. And the training guys, a bunch of dudes that I know from different places, and they come down, they get out of the truck and I'm at the pistol range and I look back there and they're all giggling like kids. And I'm thinking, what the fuck? So I holster up and I go back there and I'm looking and I go, don't tell me that old fucker beat me. They go, White Boy, he beat you by 2 fucking minutes. And I'm like, I go, what? How? He said, he never missed. Every time he pressed the trigger, he hit a piece of steel. They'd never seen anything like it. He had the best time since that stress course was built and developed. He had the best time ever. And he was in his probably late 50s.
Jesus.
Every time he pressed the trigger, he hit a piece of steel, regardless of the range, whether it was moving, popping up, popping down. left-handed, weak hand, whatever. George was a killing machine.
Was that kind of you're talking 03, 04, that time frame? Blackwater obviously has some different connotations, and that's one of the reasons we want to talk about it. But they got a blue guy like you there. They got other Delta operators, I would assume, in this place. You've got that higher level caliber, perhaps, at Blackwater at the time?
I got to see the original guys that went into the stand in early 02, all tier 1 operators, former teammates, good dudes, solid all the way across. And then by the time I got there, so if we call that the A team, by the time I got there, they were working kind of on the B plus team. And then by the time I left in mid 05, that whole thing had expanded to the point where they're bringing in a lot of young Marines, Ranger Bat boys, Force Reconnaissance Marines, but a little thin on experience, E5 type guys, good dudes, solid meat eaters. They just didn't have enough seat time. And they could shoot, they could move, they could communicate, but they didn't have any time really in a leadership role. And they didn't have enough seat time to see things and be able to put pieces together. So the ideal team, you had a couple of 20-year guys, maybe some tier 1 dudes, like you said, mostly TF blue guys. And then you needed those young meat eaters. Well, what happened is that started to go cattywampus. And what you had were, and George told me this a long time ago, when you have people with little to no experience leading other people with little to no experience, that's a recipe for fucking disaster is what it is. And, you can fast forward to 07 and there you have it.
God. Can you take us through one or two of the tougher moments that you experienced when you were in that role? I mean, we talked Najaf. Are there others that come to mind where it was kind of things are going sideways and you're just trying to make it out?
Yeah. Well, I'll go back to George and then we'll go to the shitty spots. Yeah. George is navigating single car move. We're way north of Baghdad and we're doing a route survey, and he's got this big jog, which has got lines all over it, got lat long and grid and everything, but George can navigate. So I'm the driver, I'm the wheelman. I like being the wheelman. We're doing 70, 80 miles an hour because George says, look, it's just like the boats. If you're going fast, twice as fast as everybody else, it's twice as hard to hit you with anything. Okay, let's go fast. So I see it's a goat with some det cord run out its ass up, and we're on Route 1.
Are you serious, Chris?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. A dead goat in the middle of the highway with det cord run out its ass going towards what would be the shoulder of the road. So I'm on the brakes, whip the wheel, over in the dirt, back on the gas. George looks up and he doesn't even blink. George just looks at me and says, White Boy, says this kind of place, you either pay attention to the scenery or you become part of the fucking scenery. And I'm like, oh, there we go. I'm writing that one down. Nothing fazed this guy. It just, he had seen enough. So the reason I like to talk about George is I've asked other Vietnam vets that were on the West Coast that deployed with George and were in Vietnam with George. And they all to a man, they say the most dangerous thing they did in Vietnam, Ryan, was go for a Jeep ride on a Friday night in downtown Saigon because it was a stolen Jeep. And they had the Vietnamese police and the shore patrol chasing them and shooting at them. And they're going down through Saigon through these roundabouts. And George was taking Army Jeeps and painting them gray and putting some bullshit numbers on them and stashing them in a warehouse. And he would pay the bosun mate on the ship Saturday morning when nobody was around. And they would crane them onto the ship and take them to the PI to Subic Bay. I was driving those same Jeeps in 1985 as a new guy out in Niland, California.
That's awesome.
So George was just a great guy. Here's another one. I'm up at the Palace, early days, 04, seeing some of the active duty guys, some guys from the dark side, triple digit or triple letter guys. And I'm like, hey, what are you hearing? And they're like, hey, there's a $50,000 bounty out on all you guys. Really? Specifically
on contractors, right? That's what you're saying, on contractors.
But specifically BW guys. And I thought, really? Well, what I didn't tell you was we found out that the Hamas Hezbollah guys had a hit out on my team, Cheesy's team, if you will. He was the team leader down there in Gaza. We ran Gaza for a week, and the RSO at the embassy never told us. We didn't find out till the following Monday. And, that was the beginning of how that all just funneled in. And I just said, fuck this. So I go see my sea daddy, George. And I say, hey, George, check it out, man. There's a $50,000 bounty on every one of us. George's response, and I quote, 50 grand, those cheap fucking Arabs. When I was in Vietnam, it was 1 million piastres. Fuck those guys. That's George.
Nice.
You can't make that up. I mean, nothing fazed that guy. So we progress. So I'm on that convoy security team, and there was some shit that went sideways. So that same master chief that recruited me, he goes, hey, we got some new shit going down south, and we want you to head that up. I said, okay, sure, whatever. So end up going down to Kuwait City to get those same vehicles that some of those guys, that team that got killed in Fallujah, got hung from the bridge. Yeah, we went down and got those vehicles, came up. Nothing major happened, but as I'm working down south, I end up going from Baghdad down to Hilla, which is the main State Department headquarters down south. So where we're going down south, I don't know if you've seen that map. I'm going right down through the Triangle of Death, right down the river, Hilla to Karbala to Najaf, and then I'm going down to Diwania and then down to Samarwa. And Najaf ends up, specifically Najaf and Karbala are two of the most holy sites in all of Shi'adom. So I'm doing the advance with another guy, and then we're bringing BW teams in. I show them the ropes, and then I leave and move to the next town and then wait for the BW team. So Karbala goes pretty smooth, nothing crazy. Get down to Najaf, and you could almost taste it in the air. Things have been changing. So in the small time I'm there, I'm working with these 4 El Salvadoran soldiers, spec ops guys from El Salvador, good dudes. One guy who I had trained with back in the early 90s. So, and these guys are good soldiers, 12-year Civil War. The one guy I think still had been shot 5 times, still had 2 bullets in him, and tough as woodpecker lips. And so they bring this new team down, new BW team, and the team leader is a little... he's a little weak in the leadership piece. He was a former Marine, changed his MOS. Anyway, our first big move is the boss is getting spooked. They got caught up in some linear ambush shit that target of opportunity before I got there with the El Sals. He's scared. So instead of driving 100 miles to Baghdad, I said, fuck it. Let's just head south. We'll go down to Kuwait City, drop him off the airport, and then we'll just come back. Safer drive, longer drive, made sense. So I said, all right, here you go, Skippy. His route brief was shit. He just didn't have it. So we come back one day at lunch. There's a contractor named Lionel, former 82nd Airborne guy. And he says, White Boy, do you have a moment? Sure. He says, walk with me. Here we go again. I'm going back in the CO's office. I'm thinking, what happened now? And he's like, the boss really likes you. So this is the 2IC who's now taken over. And, he likes your leadership style. He likes the way you work with the El Sals, And he says, this new team leader. And I said, yeah, I get it. And so I find out that the new boss used to be on Jerry Bremer's staff. And so rather than make some phone calls that go up the chop chain and all the way back to Moyak and to Eric, we just decided, I made the command decision. I said, okay, here's the deal. I'll take the team over. He goes back to Baghdad. Easy cheesy, right? And Lionel looks at me and goes, you can make that happen? I said, watch this. I get on the phone, same Master Chief, Team 6 guy. Yeah, new team leader's not cutting it. I'm going to stay. He's going back to you, and I'll just take the team, and it's all good. And he goes, yeah, all right, make it happen. Boom, 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 call the guy in. Hey, here's how it lays out. And but the bad part of that is, right after that is that incident in Fallujah where the guy's getting hung off the bridge. So I thought for a moment that I sent a man to his death, which is horrible. So I got about 2 days until we got the names one of which was one of the guys that I went down and those trucks that we got in Kuwait City are the trucks that they got killed in. And I remember telling Brian, I go, man, thin skin, the tires are shit, these little trucks. And he goes, well, and the problem was there were no other vehicles, till you went and got shit from the States that was kitted up, that was level 6, level 7. There were no real hard cars in country. This is March of 04. So that was a shitty thing for a minute. And then find out one of those guys is Scotty Helveston, former teammate. He's a West Coast guy, Team 5 guy, and good dude. Not really what I would call a meat eater, but phenomenal athlete. He thought he was going to go over there and make a grub steak, whatever, and it cost him his life.
You've mentioned before that this time as a contractor was like some of the best and worst of times.
Yep.
And I know one of the reasons we wanted to do this was to show kind of both sides of that experience, that it's not all how it's painted in the media, right? Having come from the units you did, what was it that you really enjoyed about that side of things, that contractor world? What are some of the upsides that people don't see, maybe?
It was, I ran everything like a SEAL platoon or like a boat crew.
Yeah.
Truck guys, gun guys, radio guys, here it is. What are you good at? What do you like to do? What can you do well? Can you do 2 or 3 things well? Task and organize, utilize your people correctly to their strengths. If they're weak in one area, then the other guy has to pick it up or whatever. And I had done enough stuff in the teams and out of the teams, or I could kind of figure it out, I thought. And I thought it was I'll just tell you straight up, I learned more about myself as a leader than I ever would have on active duty, because you didn't have that infrastructure. So I had to do the logistics, I had to do the planning, I had to do all the routes, I had to do all the briefs. It all fell on me. So I looked at it as a leadership challenge. But the bad part of that is you're not hand picking guys out of green team. You're not hand picking guys out of another platoon that that you went through buds with or whatever. This guy's solid. He's a good motherfucker. He's tough as nails. Now all of a sudden, guys are showing up and it's cats and dogs, and you have no real input. And where I'm going to go here, one of the dudes shows up, Callsign Hollywood, Air Force PJ, and combat controller.
Jeez.
Phenomenal dude. Right after that first big gunfight, I tell him, we come out in the parking lot, and I'm like, hey, look, we got to park some fucking helicopters. Little birds, 2 Blackhawks. General Sanchez is going to show up in an hour. And he goes, 2 little birds over here, 2 Hawks here, nose to tail, boom. I go, make it happen. I got shit going on. We got, bullets and bombs and 3 guys shot in the first 45 minutes, whatever. I got shit going on. And so you get guys like that. And then we get another guy, which I was going to have a whole chapter of posers, if you will.
Yeah.
Stolen valor type guys. And I'll just cut to this. The guy's name is Ben Thomas. Went through buds, get to Team 1 back when they still had, one of the reasons I still like the probation thing is just because you went through buds don't mean shit. Okay. It's a Hackett school. That's all this, a tough guy camp for 6 months. But when you get to the teams, that's when you really start training, and that's when you really need to man up. And this guy stole some shit, liar, what, I don't know. I don't even know the whole story. Don't want to know the whole story. But BW was in such a crunch for manpower, they never really looked at his DD-214. It just said Bud's class, They sent him over there. So he poses as a frogman, and he never had a trident. And it wasn't until he went through that initial thing, and then he ends up working with me. And I'm asking him some questions about his first platoon chief and deployments and things that he should know. And he doesn't. And he's always come up with some bullshit answers. And then so I went out in the interweb. Well, in the meantime, I've got shit to do. And then I find out that, he was a Buds guy, got in trouble. They sent him to security, and then he got shit canned. So he never was a frogman. Callsign was Pyro. He goes by Mookie. And then to add insult to injury, and I'm just going to say this, he used my name and my reputation, my good reputation, to get jobs at Spike Tactical and some other places.
Oh,
And then I get phone calls from what was it called? Direct Action Resource. A guy named Mason, good dude, SF guy that knew me from back in the day. And he's like, hey, do you know this Ben Thomas guy? Well, Ben got a job down there and had some stolen Rolexes that he was trying to fence to buy some guns. And it was just, it went sideways quick. And I was like, you tell that motherfucker, I see him, there's nowhere he can run and hide. So
did you run up against a lot of this in the contract? Oh, sorry. Keep going. Keep going, Chris.
That's where I'm going. So anybody can write a resume and you can Photoshop your DD-214. So what I learned early on was I go right to the awards. I go time and team and awards. Where's this guy been? And if he's talking about he's some kind of rootin' tootin' parachuting whatever, and his number one award is some fucking good conduct medal, he's lying through his teeth. Where's the deployment?
That's true.
Where's the whatever combat action? Where you been? What have you done? And unfortunately, when they're starting to throw $600, $700, $800, $900 a day around, guys figure they could type some shit up and they're going to show up and they're just going to figure it out on the job. So as we went from the A team we were talking about, I'll call George and I the B+ team, because we had some Ranger Bat boys and some Marine recon kids, good dudes, solid kids, young guys, 6, 8, maybe 10 years in. And then I started to see the way it dropped off. And what was really telling, we have that 3.5-hour gunfight. And then Travis Haley talks about it. And Travis was actually a big part of the second one. But in that first one, we come back from lunch. Let me go backwards a little bit, and I'll paint a picture for you. So there's a State Department lady that gets killed up in Hilla, which is the South Central Command for State Department. Local driver, she's alone. He's got a pistol. They're doing something, fake checkpoint. Boom, they kill him, kill her, steal the car, steal all the creds, steal the gun. And then they were knocking over some little police stations, Iraqi police stations down south. And this is all, it's all Iranians. It's all Shia. And then we come back from lunch and it's all over CNN. So everybody's in this little conference room in the middle. We're in the middle of Najaf in the center of this little town. And they're showing, CNN's got all that stuff on, showing those guys getting hung from the bridge or whatever. And by then I got the names and I knew, the who, what, where, when, how. And I was pissed. So come back from lunch. We're in the back of the room. Everyone else is watching the big TV and the boss is up there and he sees me and he called me security chief, and he pauses and says, Chief, you got anything to say? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I walk up and I said, turn that shit off. So now I'm facing the audience, which is a combination of State Department staff people, some contractors, reserve, civil affairs type people. And so I give my little speech. I go, take a fucking look, take a real hard look. I said, that's Iraq. That's the enemy. And it's right up the fucking river. And my experience tells me that shit is coming down here tomorrow. So unless you're wired for that, I suggest you pack your shit and I will get you on a truck or on an airplane and
Jeez.
get out of here. State Department, young gal, screaming. She's got her Glock 19 out. You got to teach me how to shoot. They're going to get me. I said, put that fucking gun in the holster. I said, young lady, you should have learned how to shoot long before you got here. I said, my job is not to teach you how to shoot. My job is to keep Phil and his staff alive. And that's what I'm going to do. And you need to go get your computer, your sensitive items, phones, passports, gun, everything. And I will get you out of here. And that was one of the best moves I made to get all those non-combatants out of there, because they were coming unglued quickly. Fast forward, April 4th. So I think that incident was at the very end of March, if I'm not, March, I want to say 28th, I believe, 27, 28. Boom. Same thing. So I'm reading the tea leaves. And again, this is part of the contractor thing. I don't have raw intel. I just have information that I've got to kind of read the tea leaves and see between the lines and figure it out. So we go 50-50. The Mahdi army is the big bad guys kind of down south. That's the Shia guys, Muqtada Sadr, and that story's been told and overtold. But Muqtada Sadr's house is literally less than 2 miles away from where I'm at in downtown Najaf. So the Mahdi army's everywhere, and everybody can kind of see it coming. So we go 50-50. Send half the guys to lunch. We always keep half the team. And I got the 4 LSALs. I got my 8 and the 4 LSALs. So we got 12 guys. So it's kind of a real light SEAL platoon, but we got some guys that can get it done. I'm sitting there at my desk, all of a sudden, crack, 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 gack, 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 crack, 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 gack, gack, gack. What the fuck? Okay, that's close. So I go up on the roof, and the LSALs are up on the roof of a hospital that's right next door to our command post. And it's on. Guys come back from lunch, boom, they're on the roof. And so as the story goes, we've got 9 magazines, 1 in the gun, 8 in a vest. So my quick math at 30, times 9 times 8 guys, and there's 3,500 of these Mahdi army fuckers out there running around with AKs, RPGs. So as the story goes, when there's more fuckers to shoot than you got bullets, and I got this exactly from Dick Lyons, shit gets tight real quick. And then, unfortunately, we got 3 guys wounded in the first 40 minutes. Bang, boom, bang. I got man down, and then a minute later, I got check, 2 men down, and then I got another man down. And one of the LSALs got shot right through the face with 7.62 by 39, in one side, out the other, chicklets, everything. PJ Hollywood, patch him up, bring him down. And that's when I need that Spanish colonel out of the way. So here's some interesting things. Fight, flight, or freeze. Let's go all the way back to that. So one of the guys on this team who came down here was a Navy search and rescue swimmer, non-frogman, Muay Thai guy, self-proclaimed tough guy, frozen on the stairs, just wouldn't come out on the roof, just stayed there, just in the way. He got smashed with a knee too. I looked at him I couldn't understand. And then we got that Marine Reserve Major underneath the desk, and I just remember seeing little snippets, 18 millimeter or 16 millimeter picture frames of those guys. And I thought, what the fuck is your problem? We got shit going on. We got a firefight going on. We've got wounded. We got to run a medevac. We got to bunker down. We got to, this is it. And training, I went into my Chief White platoon mode, or whatever you want to call it. And here's an interesting thing that I didn't realize. I never fired my weapon on that first day.
Wow, you were just directing traffic and getting people moving.
And just I remember running across a parking lot right next door to the south, and we had some guys over in the other building. We're trying to disperse some forces to get some angles on these guys, so we didn't end up getting surrounded because we're in the middle of town. And as I'm running across this parking lot, Ryan, about 40 yards across the parking lot, I get about 10 yards into it. I played football. I could still move pretty well back then. And I see this flash to my right, and I instantly know, before I even look, I know exactly what it is. And it's the launch motor of an RPG-7. And as I look, I cannot accelerate fast enough to outrun an RPG-7. And I'm thinking, holy shit, that thing goes buzzing over my head about 25 meters above me, impacts into this concrete wall about 30 meters to my left. And those things, that's enough to knock your fucking fillings out of your head.
Was that, keep going on that. Keep going.
So anyway, I get to that other building, and Lionel's over there, and I'm bringing ammo over, and his eyes are as big as mine. And he's like, what the fuck was that? I said, that's an RPG-7. And I'm, and so we drop off ammo, and I realize now that I got to turn around and cross that 40-yard, death zone. And I'm thinking, man, I don't want to get another rocket shot at me, and I don't want to get shot, period. And so Lionel looks at me, he goes, you going back? And I was like, yeah, I'm going back. I got no fucking choices, right? So I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm doing my little, slicing the pie, peeking around the corner, peeking around the corner. And then I just said, fuck it, here we go. Maybe a 4.540, maybe one of the best 40s I've ever had with full kit on. And adrenaline's a wonderful thing. And so there were a couple of those little moments. And anyway, I'll fast forward to BW at that time had an aviation department, and they had a guy named Hacksaw, TF-160. Check this out: 3,500 hours on goggles.
Jeez, that's a lot of time.
60s and 47s. He was part of their green team cadre. Checked out right seat, left seat, so he could fly anything. And so I had sent a quick email back to BW. Hey, base is under attack, send help. That was it. Just send it, because I didn't know if we would have comms. So we don't have any long range comms. I got a piece of shit Thuraya sat phone that's probably either getting jammed or ain't worth a shit. And good thing is the boss had a real good sat phone. So he's talking to State Department up in Baghdad. But anyway, there's all this stray voltage with Contractor. We don't have any resupply. There is no QRF. There is no AC-130.
You're on your own. Yeah.
We're on our own. So that's the name of this. If we ever do this documentary, it's Nobody's Coming. That's it. There's nobody coming. It's a big shit sandwich, and everybody's going to take a bite of this one. And the only thing that really worried me at that point is we didn't have any extra ammunition. So once we got low on ammo, I knew we were going to be fucked. And so that Corporal Young, Lonnie Young, I wrote the Silver Star Award, and because there's a corporal, and I knew it would be downgraded, and he ended up with a Bronze Star. He gets hit in the shoulder from a shooter up, and it goes under the skin, under the body armor, under the skin, bypasses his spine, and lodges over here in this of the skin. You can't do that twice in a million rounds.
No.
So I go downstairs. He's the first wounded guy. So now, but he was a saw gunner. So now we got a 5.56 machine gun. And as things progressed, we got more stuff. Because the El Salvadoran colonel really liked me, we did the medevac, got one of his El Sals out of there. And the guy that got shot through the face, his name was Alcone. The very next day, we get some 5.56 from the Spanish. And guess what I get from the El Sals? A case of Law rockets, 66 millimeter anti-tank rockets, and a case of hand grenades. And he just goes, "Here, Chief, take them, use them." And I'm like, right on. So as this story progresses, I'm on the sat phone later that day with Mr. Eric Prince.
Head of Blackwater, for those who don't know, right?
Yep, for those who don't know, started at BW. And later on that afternoon, the dust is settling, 3.5-hour firefight. We don't really have any resupply. So and the people from other bases, there's a base about a click away called Camp Baker. Those people are collapsing on our position. So we got a few more guns, no real bombs and bullets, nothing substantial to speak about. A bunch of 5.56 pop guns, which, as people know in your audience, former operators, at 300 yards plus, those things are, combat ineffective. So I'm on the sat phone with Eric, and he wants to know about this 77 grain Black Hills ammunition, which was relatively new back then in 2004, that he had gotten a hold of. And what I had to tell him was that those bullets didn't work in the guns that he bought, because the guns that he bought were civilian AR-15s made by Bushmaster, which is a 1 in 9 twist rate. And that's great for 55 grain and 62 grain 5.56, which is standard military issue. But the 77 grain bullet, because it's bigger and heavier, it needs more twist to stay, here's your aviation term, is to stay stabilized along its longitudinal axis. How's that sound?
Yeah.
So what happens at 300 yards with this big heavy bullet and a 1 in 9, you've got anywhere from a 9 to 15-inch group, because the bullet is doing all this kind of crazy shit. So, and he goes, "Well, why is this the first time I'm hearing this?" I said, "Well, sir, I don't buy your bullets and I don't buy your fucking guns, but if you would have given me those 4 M14s that I asked for when I left in '03, I said, you'd still be stacking those people up like cordwood. And he goes, well, so what's the answer? I said, it's 30 caliber. It's real simple. And he goes, well, what do you need? I said, I don't care. Heavy barrel AKs, G3s, M14s, FNFALs, whatever it is, send it. And he goes, okay, check. The very next day, you'll see that video of that little bird shows up, and that's me on the roof, and they drop off a brand new PK machine gun and a bunch of 7.62 by 54 and a brand new G3, which is a H&K 91, but a G3 is full auto. And I just took that G3 and I said, yeah, oh boy, here we go. Frogman time. Get your Frogman on. Here we go. I got a real gun. I got a claw mount, put a scope on it, and that was my gun for the rest of my time in Iraq.
So in this fight, you're at like a State Department outpost?
Yes. Go ahead.
You've got 30 people there. Some of them are state staff?
Yes. State staff, contractors. So the gunfight's over, the medevac's over, and Hacksaw, when he leaves the green zone, he's fueling up the little birds. He saw that email, and they had another place. Al Koot had fallen, and those contractors were supposed to be some Ukrainian Spetsnaz guys. They just pulled the flag down and called it. Well, after this little soiree in Fallujah, Hacksaw, CW05, retired, TF-160 guy his whole career. He's like, fuck that. So they tell Hacksaw in the green zone, where are you going? He says, we're going down to Joff. And they're like, you take those helicopters, which actually belong to the Bremer detail. So it's a separate entity, if you will.
Sure.
And they tell him, well, if you take those helicopters, you're fired. And he says, well, you can fire me now, you can fire me later, but there are our guys, and I'm going. Boom. Here comes. So he does the medevac. And then sure enough, I talked about Hollywood, CCT guy. So I get off the phone with Jerry Bremer. I get off the phone with Eric Prince. And I walk outside, and there's two little birds parked over here. And then sure enough, General Sanchez shows up, and there's two Black Hawks nose to tail right here in that same parking lot that I told Hollywood, 45 minutes ago, make it happen. And that's how good those guys were.
Yeah.
But he didn't pace anything. He didn't measure anything. He looked at me, he goes, yeah, little birds over here, Black Hawks here, nose to tail, boom. That's it. So when you're working with guys like that, and you're accustomed to working with guys like that, and then you get some of these, what do you want to call them? JV team guys or whatever, it was tough. It was really tough. And I, at that point, in my career and then being over there, I just didn't have time for a whole lot of bullshit. I could tell pretty quick, fast, and in a hurry who the fucking meat eaters were and who the posers were. And and that's part of it being a contractor. You've got to figure all of this stuff out on your own. They just send you bodies and you've got to make the best of it. But me being an enterprising guy, I did have about $10,000 or $15,000 impress fund. So here's a great example of just making shit happen. Being a frogman, I knew some KBR guys from Afghanistan. We got to get the trucks worked on, got to have maintenance, air cleaners, oil change, transmission. It's 120 in the shade or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I would just go up to the airport and get some brown liquor and put it in a backpack and go over to the KBR guys and go, hey man, I need my truck. Can you? I go, yeah, there's a little backpack in the back seat there behind the driver's side. Next thing I hear is get that fucking Suburban off the lift and get White Boy's truck on that thing now. and I got shit done. And that's kind of how I did it. And so that was when you were asking that question. It was fulfilling as a combat leader to get shit done on your own, no supervision, because I was never a flagpole guy. And that's why I didn't want to be part of the Bremer detail or anything like that. It just wasn't me. Yeah. I knew that, and Frank and I didn't really get along early. And then when I invited the advanced guys and Frank came down to Joff, he shook my hand and, Frank's a good motherfucker. But as far as he was concerned, when he heard my name, he just thought I was just an out of control frogman down there. But, and partly correct, if you will, but I functioned really well. I think it was Shrek was talking about that. chaos thing.
Yeah.
And I could kind of make sense of it, I think, better than some, maybe the same as any other operator. And you could see where the guys with the real training could get things done, and the guys that had marginal training. And this bears out when you talk about David Grossman, PTSD, and you look at the active duty component, reserve component, and then the National Guard component. As you go down those tiers, the worst things in a combat zone are what? Shitty leadership, shitty equipment, and piss poor training.
Yeah.
And that all, it all comes out the other end, and sometimes it doesn't look real pretty.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Shrek. As you were describing some of these stories, it reminded me of something that I've heard him say before, where he's like, there's a box. You can't operate outside the box, but I'll operate within like every square inch of that box. I feel like that's you right there, the way you've kind of described how
Remember what I said about being able to deal with being on the margins?
Yeah.
So I played football. So, you're going to use every little bit of that football.
Great analogy.
Maybe then some.
Yeah.
And you have to, because if you can't think that through and maybe push the envelope a little bit, and when shit goes sideways, you're really hamstringing your people and yourself as far as what you can think of as far as your combat tactics. I mean, we get done with this, and then there was another firefight, another 5-hour gig, but it was a Friday, so we were ready for that. We had belt fed. I had that PK. We had Lonnie's Corporal Youngie's saw. I borrowed a saw from an MP unit that was females that had to get out of there. We had the law rockets. Had 2 law rockets in every truck. We had a belt fed in every truck, so we just called it combat PSD. But the one thing that I did have to do, Ryan, is as soon as I could, I had to get that Tony guy, the guy that froze. I had to get him there because that cowardice under fire. I mean, that's a bad scene. So
did he fight it at all?
No. I just told him, pack your shit, you're leaving, and he knew I wasn't fucking around, and so he wanted to wait until we got some Humvees. He didn't feel safe doing a regular motorcade because we only had one hard car. Everything else was soft skin. I said, okay. So he's waiting on these Humvees. There's an Army unit coming up, and it was classic. It was just like being back in a SEAL platoon or in an assault team. I said, hey, Tony, the Humvee showed up, and he's sitting there smoking cigarettes. He's inside, and he walks out and he goes, yeah, they don't have any fucking doors on them. He turns pale, and he looks at me, and I said, nope, grab your shit. You're in the left rear. Hit it, sweetheart.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I couldn't get him out of there fast enough. And because the other guys, you could see it right away that, and he would pipe up at some briefing or whatever, and he's telling me that, I don't know about this and that. It's way outside the scope of work of the contract or whatever. And one of the guys, it wasn't Hollywood, I think it was Goldberg, who was former Marine, and he's like, hey, that fucking contract is still sitting up there in the steps where you fucking shit yourself, so shut the fuck up. And that was it. I didn't have to say a word, it's peer pressure.
You see it.
So again, fulfilling in a leadership role, yes. Here's another silly thing that I did after the second gunfight, and I got to give props to this one El Salvadoran soldier who was trapped in a base a couple clicks away during all of this. Him and another guy, they ran out of bullets. They were getting shot at, and he E&E'd through town with a little folding pocket knife. And when we saw him the next day, we gave him a Strider fighting knife, and he had blood stains all over the front of his armor, and he made it all the way back with a little pocket knife that he got at the little Haji Mart. And
was he having to fight his way out?
Yeah, had to fight his way out of this little Iraqi camp and through town in the middle of the day during this whole shit show to get back to our base. And I was like, wow, that's fucking impressive.
That is.
I don't know if I could do that.
Survival at its primal moment.
And that was one of the reasons the El Sals were such a force multiplier. The one dude had a little Parasaw, so it's a 5.56 machine gun, folding stock with a short barrel on it. I put a red dot on it for him. Oh, that dude was just, we called him Chain Blue Lightning. He was just a killer with that fucking thing. He never missed. And then Alcon, the guy got shot through the face. He had a full-length M16 with a 203 with a
No
grenade.
way. Really?
So we inherited all this stuff.
Wow.
So quick story, we're going over to this other base. No one's eaten real food now for about 3 days. And most of the gunfight stuff is over. There's mortars over here and over there, and everybody's kind of getting used to the mortars. So well, let me back up. Sanchez shows up, and I find out General Sanchez hates contractors. So here I am on the steps, big foo, all my shit on, whatever. And I shake his hand, PSD team leader, the boss is right in here, sir. And he just looks at me. So he goes in, talks to the boss. I'm talking to Hacksaw out in the parking lot. Hacksaw's got to leave. They don't have NVGs. He's got to get those birds back before it gets dark. And so General Sanchez goes up on the roof with General Kimmett, and they want to get a firsthand look at what the hell's going on, because he's getting all this, stray voltage sit reps. And he goes up there. So there's blood stains everywhere and shell casings and shit. Now there's a couple of reserve kids, and we got sandbags built up and a parapet wall, and it's not a real big roof. And he comes out of the steps, so he's crawling around, and the kids look back, and all of a sudden, they see this fucking 3-star in desert camis, and he's, who's the senior man up here, is what he wants to know. And the kids are all looking around, and he goes, God damn it, who's in charge? And they point to one of my guys, and he's got a law rocket on his back, and he's got hand grenades and fucking just, jailhouse tats and fucking big chops and long hair. And I guess Sanchez just shook his head and just fucking left. So what I did is, while Sanchez was screaming and yelling at people, I went out there and talked to the crew chief in those Hawks, because there was only a small PSD team that he had, a couple, 3 guys and the 2 generals. So I said, hey, how many seats you got? And he goes, hey, I says, we're wheels up in about 10 minutes as soon as the boss comes out. I said, give me 5. So I go back in that same little conference room where we had that discussion. And now there's blood on the fucking carpet and shit. And these people are just, they're scared shitless. They really are. And it's not their fault. They're just not wired for this.
Yeah.
So I walk in, I say, hey, here's the deal. I got 2 helicopters. You got 5 fucking minutes. You get 1 backpack. You get your computer, your passport, your gun, your sensitive items, money, whatever it is. You put it in that backpack. You get back here. Make sure you got some glasses with you, and I'll get you on that helicopter. And they just leave like rats coming off a sinking ship. And there's an older gentleman working for KBR who's a water guy, some kind of geologist, something. And he's in his 60s, big heavyset guy. And he comes up to me, and he is shaking like a dog shitting peach stones, man. He is fucking scared.
Wow.
And he's got some keys. And he asked me, Ryan, if I would go out to his trailer and get this leather attaché case. It's got money in it, and it's got all the shit, And he doesn't even want to walk outside. He
doesn't even want to go that far.
No, for him to get to the helicopter is going to be. So I run out there, boom, leather attaché. It's got about 150 grand in it, all stacked up, fucking nice and neat. I open it up, and I just looked in there, and I just fucking closed it. I had an outer pouch. I saw a passport and some other shit. Looked around, come out, and I gave it to him, gave him his keys. And I had to walk that man out to the helicopter.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't go through that training. It
wasn't their fault. They just got put in a really bad situation. I felt bad for them.
Yeah.
Not the Marine major, even though he's a civil affairs guy, I thought, and then he left right away. And
Still
I got
a Marine
out of there. So the good thing was I got all the non-combatants out of there, all in kind of one big blush, just like beat it. And some of the contractor dudes, there were some guys on Phil's staff that volunteered to stay. Lionel stayed, and a couple other guys, and they had some beat up AKs, and we got them some magazines. Magazines were getting pretty cheap at that point. And it was pretty sporty. It was pretty fucking sporty. So 3 days later, the boss says, hey, look, no one's had any hot chow in 3 days. Can you send a team over? Because the mess hall was at the separate camp. And I said, sure. So Goldberg, single truck, they fly over there. It's only less than a click. So they come up on the radio, hey man, they got bacon and eggs, hot cakes, hot coffee, fucking bring it, let's go. So I tell Phil, so we put a little motorcade together, and if nothing else, a little bit of a morale booster.
Yeah.
And so we got lead, limo, follow. Everybody's packed in there. Lead comes out of this little gate that we have, is a piece of shit, really. And they get going. So they're 3/4 of the way across. So we're rolling. And just as we get the limo rolling from left to right, what do I see? I see another launch motor over on the left flank, a fucking RPG-7. I'm thinking, you got to be shitting me. We're going to get fucking rockets for breakfast. And the fucking RPG goes flying across the road, impacts on this old building, and push. And I'm thinking, holy shit. So boom, lead, limo, follow, and everybody's on the gas or whatever. So usually when we went to a mess hall, we'd leave all the long guns and all the heavy shit in the trucks, just lock them up, and then just come in with a pistol belt on, take off the armor, relax. No, not now. Everything's coming in. We're not getting caught down. So we walk into this mess hall, Ryan. G3, PK, saws. This one dude we picked up, Lucky. He used to be. He was on some other contract. He's got a law rocket on his back, an AK-47, and his big chops. So we look like the French Foreign Legion walking in this place. And so we set everything down. Barrels facing out, clear the belt-fed guns, bolt to the rear, feed trays open, everything's good. We sit down. Well, some of the advanced group were sitting there eating with these Army guys, young kids, reserves, maybe early 20s. I don't know. They all look like kids to me. I guess we look pretty weathered. I hadn't slept real well in 3 days, hadn't eaten shit in 3 days. So we look like some pretty used up fuckers. But we come walking in there and we're getting pancakes and all this other shit. So apparently, as we walked in and set all our guns down, these Army kids are over there. They're looking at us. And the one kid says to his buddy, goes, who the fuck are those guys? And he said, oh, that's the BW guys. And he goes, well, who the fuck are they? He goes, well, all those dead guys out in town? He goes, yeah, they killed them all. And so I thought that was a pretty good statement for combat effectiveness.
Yeah.
But nobody really, any part of the head shed from Baghdad all the way down through. Phil liked me, but none of the State Department people liked us. They were just putting up with us because we could do things that they couldn't. So we were just enablers, and
but necessary. I mean, it fueled.
Well, without us, everybody dies.
Yeah, exactly.
And then so when after the Benghazi thing went down, ours was
that's where my mind goes.
Of that.
Yeah.
But what I try to explain to people in these weapons classes, teaching out here. Oh, by the way, this is covered 6. So this is an academy up in Simi Valley that I got to give those guys a plug. They take former vets, young guys, and teach them executive protection, and they get them jobs playing butler with a gun. So that's what we call it. Yeah. So
go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
The State Department, the 2 times that I had a price on my head, I was working for the fucking State Department, once in Palestine and once in Iraq. And the 2 times I got the closest to getting vaporized was Palestine and Iraq. And but then I did get a letter of recommendation from one of the guys on Phil's staff after the fact. And it's really good. I'll send you a copy of it. It's pretty cool. It's the nicest thing anybody's ever said about me.
Awesome. It's from a State Department guy.
And it comes from the State Department, which is funny. I've got all those fit reps and all that tough guy fucking shit from peacetime teams.
Yeah.
But the nicest thing anybody's ever said about my ability comes from State Department.
That's great. They saw it then. They saw the value.
Well, when I see those kids at covered 6, I tell them, you're looking at a guy that's been had a price on his head in 2 countries and been in jail in 3 different countries. And they look at me like, where did you dig this fucking guy up? But
the teams,
yeah. And so I think it keeps a little bit of that frogman mystique or whatever alive. When I look at George and Dick Lyons, the bullfrog or whatever, I'm just a lucky fucker.
You're just living up to that. Yeah. To that story. I love
If
it.
I can, only if I can.
No, for sure.
For sure.
So Chris, I'm taking you way longer than I thought.
Okay.
I've got 2 questions I ask everybody.
Yep.
One question is, when you were in these combat zones, whether it was in uniform or not, was there anything you carried with you that you wanted to have on you? Good luck charm, something that somebody gave you
Nope.
that you just wanted to have close by?
Nope.
You're one of those
Team guy
guys.
shit, sterile.
Nothing.
No dog tags. No rings. No anything. I was a single guy most of the time, and I figured the one thing I will tell you though is, and Phil, the State Department guy, and I talked about this at length, is neither one of us was going in a fucking orange jumpsuit.
Yeah.
Ever.
You'd do anything to avoid that, basically.
Oh yeah, I told him, because he asked me. He's a very religious man, wife and kids, and I just said, hey, if it comes to that, I'll do you and me.
Yeah. That's a real conversation. I mean, I think
that's a real conversation I had never had
that
before in my fucking life ever.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he asked me, "Hey, at first he didn't want to pull the flag down and run." I said, "We're not running from shit. Fuck these guys." There's George again, and he said, "Well, look, da 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 da." And there had been enough shit in orange jumpsuits at that point, and then the Fallujah thing was really fresh in everybody's mind. I just said, "No, not happening. Not on my watch."
Yeah. Then the next question, the last one that I ask everybody, Chris, is as you look back on your time in the teams and as a contractor, where you nearly died more times than in the teams, would you go back and do all that again?
Absolutely. Wouldn't even blink. Wouldn't even blink. Send me in, coach.
I feel like you'd go back tomorrow, Chris.
Tomorrow.
If I called you. Yeah.
I told somebody the other day, I said, if I was on active duty with what I know now about bombs and bullets and tactics, I said I'd be fucking deadly motherfucker. So,
man, I'm so appreciative of this, Chris. Any other things that you'd like to share? You mentioned covered 6. Anything else for you that you want to make sure people hear?
Yeah, I've got a little company out here in Scottsdale, Tier 1 training. I do private lessons out here teaching shoot, move, communicate. Cowtown is this little outdoor range, and then C2 Tactical is an indoor range when it's 115 outside. And I figure Uncle Sugar spent a hell of a lot of money training me. There was a time when I went to almost every major shooting academy in America. And, I've worked with world-class shooters, Dan Inosanto, Paul Vunak. Dan Inosanto is one of the 3 guys that was an instructor under Bruce Lee. So I've been very fortunate in my time. So I think that I should share that with others, especially in today's world. It's getting really fucking nuts. What I tell the civilian clients is a lot of people in America own guns. A lot of people in America shoot guns. Not everybody in America can run their gun the way they should. And I try my best to teach them how to do that.
That's perfect. Great place to end it. Thanks so much, Chris, for the time. I'm
right
so
on,
appreciative.
Man.
This was
Thank
fun,
you for the
man.
opportunity.
Oh, it was a blast.
Hope you enjoyed that combat story with a long-time SEAL. Thought we'd jump into a couple guest comments. First is a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It's from Quentin.wtx. It says, I look forward to every Saturday so I can listen to your podcast on my way home from work. Thank you to every veteran that has served. I'm truly grateful for what you all did, and I don't take it for granted. It makes it sound like you might not be a veteran, Quentin, which is totally fine, and really appreciate the fact that you're leaving this comment and you take the time to listen to some of the stories of the bravery and sacrifice that some of these other vets have gone through. It means a ton. And I'm also sorry to hear that you're working on a Saturday, man, but if we can make it any better, that sounds great to me. So thanks for taking the time to leave that 5-star review. Helps us get in front of more people. Then on the last SEAL that we had interviewed by the time we had filmed this, I had a few YouTube comments. One was from Frank Edward Mattis 346. He says, best one I've watched so far. Thank you both for your service. And that was the interview with Mike Rutledge, former SEAL, former 160th pilot, former classmate of mine in flight school. Also on that same episode, we have subscriber Will G. Becker. He said, I so enjoyed Mr. Rutledge and his story. What a warrior and hero. Ryan, thank you for combat story. It's incredible. And then at Low Flying Aircraft 9309, also a subscriber. It says, great podcast. So just for both of you as subscribers, got a lot of options out there, I know. And it means a ton that you take your time listening to me and some of these great guests and taking the time to leave a comment there for us. So thank you so much. Appreciate you all tuning in. Till next time, stay safe, y'all.